Council members Brown,
Here.
Domkowski,
Here.
Fluid,
Here.
Gold,
Here.
Shaw,
Here.
and Mayor Wall.
Here. All right, we did have a special meeting right before the regular meeting, and there is nothing to report out on from the special meeting. And we do have Council Member Fluid, who is joining us by Zoom. I think he needs to read or say a few words to explain why. Go ahead, go for it, Ned.
Thank you, Mayor Wall. That I just need to announce that I have a child care need that requires my participation be remote, and that there is no one over the age of 18 in the room with me, and I will keep my camera on for the duration of the meeting.
Thank you, Ned. All right. Do I have a volunteer on the council to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure.
All right.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic, which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're going to do the public comment period pursuant to Government Code Section 549, 54.3A. Persons wishing to address the council on non-agendized items that are within the jurisdiction of the town are invited to do so. Please note, however, that the council is not able to undertake extended discussion or to act on non-agendized items. Such items can be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on a future agenda. This communication period is limited to 5 persons, 3 minutes each. Any additional persons wishing to be heard will be scheduled at the end of regular business. And I know that we have a representative from WOA with us. I'm going to actually invite you to come up first, and I would love to hear from you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Anne Van Kamp. I'm addressing you as a not a council member, a steering committee member of the Woodside Area Horse Owners Association, and to pretty much thank the town of Woodside for their initial and ongoing support, as well as the town manager for their support, and Yas Emrani and his crew for getting the trails in perfect order. I'm not going to say any more, but I'm hoping we can run the video of our 20th anniversary and it'll all speak for itself. So big thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, do we have that video teed up?
Yes, bear with me as I get that started. Yep, sorry, I can't find the sound.
Looks like the sound on the video is
Bottom right hand. There's a way down on the screen.
Yep.
Way down here.
a way bottom, like, yeah, there you go.
Oh, just crank it. I think that's,
You put your mic next to it?
yeah, there you go.
Town of California, complete with its redwoods, idyllic landscape.
Sorry, doing our best here.
It's a small town. Small town rural feel, horses and the equestrian lifestyle at its core. Drive through Woodside today, Woodside stores, and it's not surprising to find a horse or a few tied to hitching racks outside the restaurant or shop. Many properties still have barns and fields for keeping horses at home, and equestrian riding centers, therapy organizations, and even a nationally registered historic stables provide services for residents and visitors alike. So how is it that this rare gem in the heart of bustling Silicon Valley maintains its rural charm? It's all thanks to years of zealous protection of the horse's habitat by resident horse owners who have recognized how integral the horse has been in building, protecting, and enriching this community. Activism started with 7 ladies who in 1922 formed the Woodside Trail Club to protect the network of trails threatened by subdivision of land. The world-class public and private trails, as well as the Woodside Trail Club, still exist today. In 1956, to protect the area from large-scale development, reshaping land and communities in the entire Bay Area, citizens incorporated the town of Woodside to preserve the rural nature of the area, including its horses. Knowing fully well that without continued and focused protection, it could all be lost forever, the Woodside Area Horse Owners Association, known as WOA, was established in 2000 to continue helping equestrian-related issues through outreach and financial support. To date, WOA has gifted over $400,000 to programs and projects in the greater Woodside area, including for trail preservation and maintenance, the historic Polish stable renovation, large animal rescue equipment, community groups such as the Junior Riders Snoqualmie Club, animal evacuation and care during wildfires, a scholarship to support upcoming equestrians in their educational pursuits, and therapeutic equestrian programs providing life-altering experiences for underserved children and communities, war veterans, and those with physical and cognitive challenges. All of this is possible with the funds raised through the Woodside Day of the Horse, an annual event created by WOA and now its 20th year. It is 3 days of fun and activities to educate and raise awareness and celebrate the horses that are but a memory in many surrounding cities and towns. So important is Day of the Horse to the town of Woodside that on December 14th, 2004, the town council passed a resolution that the second Saturday in October forever declared Day of the Horse month. The area remains a strong horse community, a fact that is attracting new residents who value the equestrian lifestyle. But not everyone moving to the area recognizes the value of horses. Tennis courts are replacing stables, and the area continues to see steady decline in horses, barns, horse-studded fields, and backyard trails. WOA welcomes support from the community to carry out its mission to preserve the fundamental role of horses in maintaining the rural character of the town of Woodside and neighboring communities, to enhance opportunities for equestrian activities, and to promote the enjoyment of horses in all their various roles. Join us as we gallop forward for another 20 years. Help us preserve a connection to our past and to nature, and foster a community where the horse is valued for all its contributions to quality of life in the Woodside area.
Thank you. That was a lovely video. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to continue the public comment period. If anybody else in the room would like to make public comment, please come to the mic and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. Elena Vandervoort Wagner. I am the Vice Chair of the Sustainability and Climate Committee, as you formerly know me from the Environment Committee. I wanted to bring up a couple of things today. When Chris Shaw was mayor, he had done a great job of bringing together all the heads of different committees, where we really had a wonderful time coming together and learning a little bit about each committee, what they were focused on, what they were doing, and it enabled all of us to have a look at how we can engage further in each other's activities and help benefit each other and help bring those things through to the council. And I felt like that was a wonderful thing that we had. I'd love to see that come back. I've talked to several other members from other committees where we're sort of missing out on that. And one of the things that has come up a lot with me lately that is not my field is actually, I think Dick Brown and I both had conversations with our fire marshal, Kim, this last week, and particularly in looking at ways that they could further engage when volunteerism during their slower seasons when we're not in this level 5 fire warning that we're in at the moment, but how we're able to help further engage. And we were looking at different ways that we could support our elderly and community that is needing a little bit more support, whether it's doing sandbags or bringing together different applications for being able to support them in evacuations. And so while we have other committee members, and I suggested bringing that to other committee members who are focused on that, like our emergency preparedness team, it would be wonderful to be able to have these roundtable conversations again. So I'd love to see that interaction, that communication, and that sort of self-involvement where we can all have a voice again.
Thank you, Elena. Yeah, easy to organize a meeting like that. So great idea.
Thanks, Meryl.
Julie, can we put the timer up for public comment? Thank you. All right, any further public comment in the room?
Hi, my name's Hassan Abarish. I just have one thing I want to bring up, and that's communication regarding road closures or road, delays from road work. So I know it's kind of a minor issue, but on 84, where I live, off of 84, on Grandview, driving down, there's usually at least one stop from road work, and it's, sometimes a few minutes, but in the last month, there have been some days where it's been up to 4 different spots between 84 and Sandhill Road. So between our house and getting to pick up our daughter from Ormondale, and I'm not sure exactly, when it's going to happen or how long it's going to take. And so there have been times where it's taken literally double the amount of time that it usually takes just because of these. So I was wondering if there's any way to increase communication about when road closures are going to be and where, and if there is any current system set up in place to communicate those kind of issues.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. Yes, I'm certainly not the expert on this, but I do know, I think it depends on like the administrator of the road, whether it's Caltrans or whatnot, but I'm gonna turn it over to Yaz to speak to kind of what systems we currently have in place around road closures and how you get notified and how we push that information out to residents. And then I might then bounce it over to Kevin to talk a little bit about our updated communication strategy and whether or not there's anything more we could do on the website or maybe in our upcoming social media channels. So let's start with Yaz.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Wall, members of City Council. So we have tried to really increase the communication between the utility companies. A lot of these road closures or lane closures happen when utility companies come and do their work from tree trimming to replacing overhead lines or underground lines. There's a set of conditions of approval for the encroachment permits that they're supposed to follow. We've noticed that they don't always follow that, so we have added one more layer. I would say it's a little bit annoying to them, but that's good because they kind of gets them to work with us. But we required a meeting whenever there's a road closure, a week in advance. Now, as part of what they're supposed to do, they're supposed to notify all the residents that are impacted. So we require that, whether it's by the electronic signs or in some cases, even the notification by letters to the residents. So all of these are ongoing. We just sometimes these companies contract out with contractors and they don't communicate these requirements down to that level. but we're trying to make sure that they're on top of it. And I think the idea of adding it perhaps to our website would be a good idea in terms of we can communicate that, certainly work with our colleagues to add maybe a section to our website in terms of upcoming road closures.
Wait, Kevin, we don't have a section on the website around road closures?
No, I don't think we have a page. We've done them for specific instances that we know of for major, but that we could certainly add a page that as we get that information, we can upload it. And I think the other thing you alluded to is maybe when we've got Instagram added to the toolbox, it's something that we can just relay out and put a quick message as well on known closures.
Okay. So Hassan, thank you for bringing it up. Sounds like maybe there's some improvements we can make on our website and social media channels. And then, I'd say if you do find that you're not getting notified of a road closure and it's causing an unexpected delay, feel free to give the town a heads up. And so then we can figure out what went wrong and get better from there.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the Zoom room. I see Kristen News hand up. You've got the mic. And you're on mute, Kristen.
Thank you. I also live up the hill. I called to speak actually about probably the same issues that Hassan just spoke of. There have been, I realize that Woodside is sort of sandwiched between multiple entities, so not just the town itself, but then there's county and there's Caltrans. So I realize that this adds some complexity toward gaining, the information about closures and distributing the information. Obviously, having subcontractors in, kind of muddles that even further. But driving down 84, there was a segment of waiting. I waited over 10 minutes just to get to Portola Road. And then whether I went left or right, either on Woodside Road or onto Portola Road, there was yet another project with yet more waiting. And then even worse is the project that's going on, it seems underneath the slack lines. And so I think that's county, but that project, for reference, to drive my daughter to preschool, the normal drive time is about 14 minutes, and Google Maps correctly assessed that it would take me 26 minutes one way. So the waits are not insignificant, and they do add substantial time. I was also talking to a neighbor of ours. She's older, and she missed a doctor's appointment because between all of the waitings to get to Stanford, she was over 20 minutes late, and they canceled her appointment after 15 minutes. So it really is problematic. I think it's not just the onus is not just on the different entities that are doing work to communicate it to the town, but it would be great if maybe if this is Yaz, who's the engineer. I'm not quite sure who would be the liaison with these organizations, but if we can bring this to the town's attention sooner, because yes, there are signs that are, electronic signs that say road work and these dates, but there's no announcement or anticipation of, wait times. And in my opinion, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes wait, which are some of the wait times that I've experienced, that's egregious. 5 minutes, fine. 15 minutes, not fine. That's a lot. And so it's the wait times that also are, and in addition to that, although there is roadwork signs, the dates have started after the start date and have ended after the end date. So they are not accurate reflections of the actual work that's being performed. So I would appreciate as a resident, just better information, whether that's provided by those entities or sought by the town and then communicated to residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, point taken. I think we definitely have some direction to staff to examine this issue and figure out how we can disseminate information about road closures out in a more effective way, and not just the fact of a road closure, but also if there's a way to get information on anticipated wait time. So definitely hearing you loud and clear. And then Julie, can we get the timer, please, for public comment? All right, I'm going to stay in the Zoom room and go to David Middleman.
Good evening. David Middleman, 280 Grandview, and I'm speaking as a private citizen. After going through the housing element process, I think I can speak for the majority that the town would rather find other ways to address our housing element besides multifamily housing. Currently, our 10-acre vacant lot in the Western Hills is zoned for SCP 5. This zoning allows us to keep bees, have 50 chickens, 20 horses or cows, 40 sheep or goats, and operate a greenhouse of up to 250 square feet. We are allowed a maximum residence size of 8,800 square feet with the maximum residence size exception. We're also allowed a 3,000 square foot barn and 1,500 square feet of additional accessory structures. However, with the current code, we can only build 2 ADUs, each with a maximum size of 1,500 square feet, which is a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment for a couple, but almost impossible for a family of 4. With the changes prescribed in the housing element adoption, we would only be able to build 4 ADUs despite our parcel's total floor area allowance of nearly 12,000 square feet. While we do have a love for horses, we will not be housing them on our property. However, we could house more people. If the ordinance removed the cap of ADU count and ADU size, but instead allowed the use of the total floor area already permitted in the code in whatever manner a property owner saw fit, one could fit more units on the large parcels of Woodside and potentially address future housing element requirements without the need for multifamily housing at 20 units per acre. One could fit 7 800 square foot ADUs on an SCP 5 lot that had a primary residence of 6,000 square feet. That is 8 units at a density of 1.6 per acre. This allotment still has a lower density than an R1 lot with 1 ADU. When the ADU ordinance is up for debate, I strongly encourage the council to consider removing ADU caps per parcel, leaving the total floor area restrictions to manage density. Otherwise, we are leaving housing capacity outside the town center on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. All right, going back to the room, any further public comment in the room? All right, not seeing any takers, and I don't see any hands up in the Zoom room. So we're gonna close the public comment period and go on to our town manager report.
Thank you, Mayor Wall and council members. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention. A different state agency that we work with for annual compliance is, we alluded to this a little bit last time, is the California Department of Waste and Recycling, known as CalRecycle. Every year we're required to file a report on both waste activities as well as programs to reduce and to divert waste. And as a follow-up, CalRecycle comes to town and walks around and goes over the implementation program that we have identified. And that will occur next Wednesday, the 30th. That is all focused on commercial properties, but just something to know. And you may see town staff and official looking state staff walking around, kind of taking a look at the garbage, the waste regime that we have here in town. The other thing I wanted to mention, I think last time we were talking about changes in the sheriff's office and leadership, and we have a new captain assigned to the headquarters bureau, which is the person who effectively serves as our police chief. That individual is Frank Del Porto. Captain Del Porto, actually, when I met him last week, he looked familiar, and that's because he actually was a deputy who served here in Woodside 10 plus years ago. So the good news there is he's got some working familiarity. He's been on the roads. He knows the town, and he will be stepping in for the interim assistant sheriff, Matt Fox, who was promoted up recently. That's what I have under town manager report.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, we do have one appointment this evening. There's a report and a recommendation from the Town Council Committee's Appointments Subcommittee for the Woodside History Committee. I'm on this committee, so I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Gold to update us on where the committee landed on this appointment
Thank you, ma'am.
application.
Yes, we received one application for the History Committee. It was from Melody Westerville. And we did speak with the committee chair about it, and Melody has the chair's blessing in addition to a very credible and substantial list of references and people who would comment on her capabilities. And so the committee, after due deliberations, has recommended that she be appointed to the History Committee.
Thank you, Councilmember Gold. And keep me honest, Jean, do we need to vote on this or is that, we do? Okay. Can we
Oh.
do a vote, please?
Oh, I'll make a motion. Do you need a motion? Make a motion that we appoint Melody Westervelt to the History Committee. Second that.
Council members Brown,
Yes.
Domkowski,
Yes.
Fluid,
Yes.
Gold,
Yes.
Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Wall.
Yes. All right, we're going to go on to the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be approved by one roll call motion unless a request is made at the beginning of the meeting that an item be withdrawn or transferred to the regular agenda. Would any council member like to pull a consent calendar item?
Pull 3 for me, please.
And I'll pull 7.
Okay, we'll pull 3 and 7. Can I hear a motion on consent calendar items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8?
So moved.
Second.
Council members Brown, Domkowski,
Yes.
Fluid,
Yes.
Gold,
Yes.
Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Wall.
Yes. All right, Councilmember Gold, can you speak
Sure.
to consent calendar item number 3?
Yes, item 3 is a resolution approving an updated joint exercise of the Joint Powers Board for the San Mateo County Operational Area Emergency Services Organization. And I am the town of Woodside's representative on that particular group. I just wanted to mention that this was already approved by the individual representatives from each city or town on the committee unanimously. And it was only meant, it hasn't been updated in like 20 years. So it's meant to update it and to bring it current to current terminology. That's it. I'll answer any questions. I don't presume that there are any, but I just wanted to, there's no changes to this as far as our fees or any other responsibilities go, but this is all the mutual aid that we provide other cities and towns in the county. No questions?
No questions.
Oh, well, we can do, you want to do them together?
Yeah, we could do them together. Any questions for Councilmember Gold or in general on this item?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Domkowski, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, we haven't pulled this one for a while. It's the treasurer's report, and I just wanted to give an update on the pensions. We made that allocation back in the post-pandemic market pullback 4 years ago to shore up our pension obligations, and those assets are now up 40% over the last 4 years. Councilmember Gold and I do serve on the audit committee. We'll get an update on our pension obligations in the coming months, but I suspect that they're going to be in a good place. So just a comment really about relative strength. And of course, the other observation is now that interest rates have reset, we are earning 4.5% on our reserves. So that 8.9 million is bringing in 400,000 a year. So between the earnings power and then simply being able to convey to our staff that and potentially any new town manager that our pension obligations are in a position of strength is just worthy of note. And that's all I wanted to add.
Very worthy. I think we are quite lucky on the council to have such strong finance expertise, and I think we are seeing that play out. No, I say that very seriously. So it's really great to hear that, we're strong financially.
Thank you. And with that, I would make a motion.
All right. Second.
Council members Brown,
Yes.
Domkowski,
Yes.
Fluid,
He said yes.
Yes.
Gould, Shaw,
Yes.
and Mayor Wall.
Yes. All right. I think we're now moving on to what I imagine everyone in the room and on the Zoom room is here for this evening. We have a public hearing on Kenyatta Corners. I'm not gonna read the whole item. And before we start, I want to just remind everyone, we are all here wanting to do the best for the town. And I really just want to ask everyone, share your views, go into detail. We really do want to hear from everybody that wants to make a comment tonight, but please let's keep it respectful. We don't need to, let's keep it, we're all neighbors here and we're all here trying to do the right thing for the town. So my ask to you is let's have a respectful conversation. And I did get a few folks reached out to me wanting to have more than 3 minutes to speak this evening. And unfortunately, we have to be fair to everyone. So everyone will have 3 minutes to speak. If you do feel as though you need to say more, you can speak again once everybody else has had an opportunity. So you can, go to the back of the line and speak again if that's what you feel like you need to do. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to kick us off.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Wall and council members. I can hear the echo, so we're good on sound. This is going to be a kind of a team presentation. I'm going to provide the outline, and Sage and Jean will fill in with some specific information. So we'll start right at the beginning with a description of the project and what the application is for. Sage, if you can just give a high-level description of the project.
Thank you for your patience, having a little technical difficulties, but I think it worked it out. So a brief description of the project is to give just a brief overview. The property owner submitted an application to construct new permanent outdoor dining parklets in front of the two existing restaurants, Bucks and the Village Bakery. So I'll just kind of point that out. So these are the two areas in the front showing the new proposed parklet areas with bike parking in the middle. The project also includes the expansion of the parking lot on the rear parcel to accommodate all the uses on the Kenyatta Corner Shopping Center. The site currently has 155 parking spaces. Sorry, I should show that more clearly. This is the area of the proposed parking lot expansion. The parking lot currently has 155 parking spaces, and the project would include a total of 109 spaces with a net increase of 34 parking spaces. The project also provides some landscaping and fencing improvements, along with trail improvements through the site and along Kenyatta and Woodside roads. Bucks is currently allowed to have 120 seats during all business hours. And with the construction of the proposed parklets, the proposal would increase the seat count for Bucks from 120 seats to 144 seats. The Village Bakery is currently allowed to have 70 seats between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. and 95 seats between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. With the construction of the proposed parklets in the applicant's proposal, the project would increase the seat count for the bakery to up to 117 seats, and this would be for all business hours. And so that's just a brief overview, and we'll get into some more of the details as we go through the presentation.
Thank you, Sage. This project requires, and the package of actions before you, there are 8 different entitlements that are required. I'm just going to list them. We'll talk more about them as it pertains to other issues that are identified. But the entitlements are design review for the new parking and parklets, conditional use permit amendment, a variance to the parking size space requirements, a grading exception for grading cuts that exceed 8 feet in height and site grading that exceed 1,500 cubic yards, a general plan designation change from residential to commercial, a general plan conformance determination for partial vacation of an open space easement, and the last to bring, and the last item for consistency with Measure A would be a rezoning of the rear parcel from rural residential to community commercial. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. In terms of what the council can do tonight, just to set expectations, you can, of course, act to approve the application as it's submitted and as conditions are outlined in your packet. The council could also make modifications to the project tonight and take action to approve this evening. Council could also request project modifications or additional information and continue the matter to a future date for action. And the council can also act to deny the application. The Planning Commission reviewed and recommended approval of this project on October 9th. That was following review by several town committees, including the ASRB. The Planning Commission did identify several outstanding issues that it wanted the council to focus on and make determinations about. And I want to talk about what those are. There are five issues that we see related primarily to the parking lot and its function and its design that the commission wanted the council to talk about, deliberate, and make a final determination regarding either the project or the conditions of approval. And I'm going to have Sage kind of provide the background or a little deeper explanation of what these are as we go through them. The first has to do with landscaping and screening of the parking area.
So the landscape plan has evolved a bit since the beginning of the project, but just to point out what is being proposed for landscaping is this is the latest landscape plan proposed by the applicant. There are some ornamental trees proposed to the parklet, so 4 pear trees, Japanese maples at the parklet areas. And in kind of the interior of the parking lot and some at the corners, there are 4 new pear trees proposed, so a couple in the median, one at the corner of the parking lot, and one on the other side, the northern end. There's a total of 6 trees, smaller oak trees that would be relocated on site. So these are some of the trees that would need to be removed, and those would be relocated. And the last piece has to do with what was kind of evolved through the process. So as part of the ASRB review and the Planning Commission review, and ultimately the Planning Commission's recommendation, they looked to the applicant to provide details of a landscape screening plan that would help screen the proposed parking lot expansion from the properties to the west. Along with that, they were looking at a 4-foot solid wood fence that could be proposed behind the landscaping. And this would be not too tall to where it kind of creates a security issue where people can't see between the fence and the parking lot when walking through the trail in the back, but enough that could partially screen most vehicles' headlights as they were pulling into the parking spots. And there would be the additional screening the applicant has proposed. We have total of 4 big leaf maple trees being proposed in this area, as well as 3 Pacific madrone trees. Interspersed between those trees would be a series of shrubs. They're proposing 65-gallon shrubs that could be located along the west side of the parking lot. And these would be proposed to be California rose and coyote brush. So the applicant, well, I'll get to the next part with fences and walls in the next piece of the presentation.
And for the council on your dais, there are, in the staff report, as we work through these issues, there were sections called out. They were in bold italics that identify the issues that the council was going to be asked to look at. And just for a convenience, there's a sheet on in front of you that just pulls those out. It starts with landscaping and privacy screening that's just discussed down through interim measures. The second issue area was around fences and walls, as Sage just alluded to. So go ahead with those, Sage.
So along with the landscape plan, the fences and walls have evolved a bit through the project. So the applicant initially proposed, the project includes a retaining wall that's necessary to construct the parking lot, and that retaining wall would hold up the dirt and the roadway for Kenyatta Road. This is proposed to be a gabion basket wall, a series of wire that holds in stones. It's structurally installed to provide the necessary retaining of the soil. On top of that, the applicant had proposed an open fence. So this is a Corten and wire mesh fence. Corten steel, it's a metal that patinas, it rusts really quickly and kind of stays at that rust, giving it a kind of rural look. Corten is a material, and even Corten fences are something that we do see throughout town in residential and commercial uses alike. So I'm going to show you, just going back to the landscape plan, that fence location would be above the retaining wall along Kenyatta Road, and then it runs along towards the northern property line, the retaining wall that's necessary that dives down into the dirt as the grade gets lower. The applicant on the latest proposal has modified the Corten fence to a solid wood fence. So similar location, but instead proposing a solid wood fence. Staff has
saying that the Corten fence is going to be a solid wood fence is incorrect. Corten fence stays as it is. That wood fence is only for the west side of the parking lot.
So if that's,
I want misinformation there.
well, we're working from the plans,
Yeah,
but
if you read the plans, it has it on there.
But do you want to continue, Sage? I mean, the issue that we had identified was that staff recommended that it be a Corten fence, which it sounds like that was the intent. So I think
Okay, and then I'll
And
just say,
with the-
we'll have an opportunity during public comment, so hold your comments, we want to hear them, but let's let the staff report and continue, and then, hold your comment for the public comment period, please.
And just to clarify, we were comparing the two elevations. So at the same elevation, it was showing the different fencing styles. So that's what led us to believe the change in fencing. So with that, so there was still discussion at the Planning Commission meeting to look at a 4-foot tall fence along the west side of the parking lot. In the applicant's response, they've noted that having the landscaping and the 4-foot tall fence may not be necessary for effective screening. So they indicated that they prefer just to do the landscape screening, and that was in their response. So the staff has recommended the condition of approval to do the Corten fence along the east and northern side, as well as the solid 4-foot tall fence on the west side in conjunction with the landscaping to have more effective screening. That's with regard to the fences and walls.
all right, next down that list have to do with landscape lighting in the parking lot.
So with the landscape lighting, so currently there's a couple different light fixtures out there. There are some shorter fixtures that are about 5 to 6 feet tall, and there are taller fixtures that are noted as 14 feet tall. Initially, the applicant indicated to leave the fixtures that are in the rear parking lot now, and then in the expanded parking lot was proposed just to match the taller pole fixtures that were out there. And through the ASRB process, they asked the applicant to really look at removing the existing fixtures and just kind of having one comprehensive plan with new fixtures. So the applicant came back and noted that they could have 12-foot tall pole fixtures, just 4, and that would replace all of the existing lighting as well as the other new lighting that was proposed. During the Planning Commission meeting, there was still some concern about the height of the lights. And asked the applicant to further refine the light plan and look at lower fixtures. The applicant responded and identified the same types of fixtures, but lowered it to 10 feet tall. They also further clarified on the plans to use an LED color with 2700 Kelvin. And what that is, it's a warmer light as opposed to, as you get higher in this Kelvin scale, the lights become a lot brighter and whiter. So they're trying to tone down the brightness of the lights. So the lighting was twofold for the applicant. One, just definitely for just navigating the lot itself. The lower lights don't provide as much disbursement of light and need a lot more of those lights. There are some concerns if lights are too low, especially in the daytime when the lights aren't on, that taller vehicles may not be able to see them and are more likely to strike those lights. And the other piece is really security. They felt having, security has been a concern throughout the project. And so they were looking to make sure that there's enough lighted illumination on the light while keeping those fixtures low enough to reduce the amount of light spillage that may be seen from offsite, as well as the taller poles provide the opportunity for additional security cameras. And so that will go into the next topic.
Just go with it. The fourth of their 5 were security issues.
And so At the planning commission level, they were asking for more of a kind of comprehensive security plan. Throughout the project at the ASRB level and planning commission level, there's been a request for some type of barriers on the property, gates, chains, something that would keep vehicles out. There's been, maybe closing off the front of the lot and just completely closing it off, or maybe just closing off the back part of the lot during evening hours. The applicant has noted that this could be really problematic and hard for them to implement, partially due to the fact that there are employees there at different hours of the night, especially like cleaning crew at the different units. So they come on while the other businesses are closed, as well as sometimes there's other employees there that have to show up earlier than actual business hours. And the practicality of installing barriers there is something that is not something they'd like to entertain. Given the recommendations from Planning Commission, that's still built into the conditions of approval to do the security barriers. It's something that the council can further discuss as we get into the use permit conditions. The other items that the Planning Commission noted was anything else to help increase security. And one of the thoughts was, would there be some type of on-site security, or is there some type of security patrol that could effectively go through the site during non-business hours to check on it to make sure that there are no activities taking place that shouldn't occur. The applicant has noted that the Woodside Patrol does visit the property. This is primarily during the lunchtime hours, so it may be trying to help enforce or correct if there's any issues during those times where parking is at its least. So there are conditions of approval related to this, and the council can discuss if a further security patrol is necessary, the barriers are necessary or not, and those can be modified if the project is pointing towards approval.
And then the last item in this section from the Planning Commission had to do with trail access and trail improvements.
So trail access, it's been a topic of discussion through various committees, ASRB and Planning Commission, and that's also evolved. Currently, there's an easement, actually, if you zoom in here, the current easement runs immediately adjacent to the northern property line, and then it turns, and in this case, you would head south along the top of Creek Bank. The existing trail itself is not developed along the northern property line. There's kind of an informal trail that's been used. You can see in this dash line that it cuts through where the parking lot would be expanded. The existing trail easement is just outlined for equestrian use only. There's been a lot of discussion about, currently the trail is used by pedestrians, equestrians, bikes, and most notably used by kids getting to and from the elementary school or other uses in the town center. The committees, many felt it was important to retain the allowance of that use for bicycles and pedestrians. And so with that, the Planning Commission recommended that it be a multi-use trail to allow all three modes of transportation. While not extremely common in Woodside to have bikes and equestrians on the same trail, given the fact that this has been used that way for a number of years without any significant conflicts, it was the recommendation of the Planning Commission to allow the multi-use trail. Then the location became the question, and there was different options. It is noted that immediately adjacent to the northern property line, one, it's right next to a residence, so pulling that further away from the residential property line is just a benefit to that resident. As well as there are a lot more trees there, and it's a steeper topography in that area. And so moving the trail further south is ideal for many reasons that I just discussed, to getting away from the residential property, as well as it will allow some grade and change in the trail location for it to have a less steep slope to better navigate on bikes or walking through. So there is a proposal to move that and construct the trail a little bit further south from the existing easement location, make it a multi-use trail, and then provide any little grading or small improvements that may be necessary for the already developed part of the trail. As part of the discussion, it also came into play as looking at the trails along Kenyatta Road and Woodside Road. The Kenyatta Road Trail, in relatively good condition for the most part. There's some areas that could use some minor improvements. As you get to the corner of Woodside Road, it's a little steeper there. There's a little bit more erosion that's taking place. So some ability for improvements there. So the applicant has noted that they could do improvements there, even try to pull it a little further away from the roadway, pulling it more onto the property, also including a crosswalk across the first driveway. And then as you continue towards Woody the Fish, provide another crosswalk there, helping further to identify that pedestrians may be crossing that area. And that is the concludes for the trails.
Thank you, Sage.
Okay, next I'm going to ask the town attorney to speak about the rezoning of the parcel as well as the open space easement parcel.
So good evening. Upon the approval of Measure A, the voters authorized that the rear parcel at the center could be improved for surface parking, play structures, and trails. That really was effectively a rezoning of the property. And so before you tonight, we're also asking you to do two additional things, which would bring all of the Woodside official records into compliance with that zoning that the voters have already put into place. And the first would be to approve a change in the general plan land use designation, changing this parcel's designation from R to C, and also to amend the zoning map designation for this property so that it would be amended from RR to CC. And I want to call out something because it was raised as a concern by one of the residents at the last hearing. If you take a look at page 76 in your staff report, where the map rezoning occurs, you will see that we have placed a very clear notation on that map to indicate that Measure A allowed for only those very limited commercial uses on this parcel, and that no additional uses could be authorized unless there is another voter initiative to change that. We wanted to make that clear because there was some concern expressed last week that this was a wide open, any kind of commercial use on that parcel, and that is indeed not the case. So that addresses the zoning issues that are in the staff report. In order to implement Measure A, you were also going to have to deal with an open space easement that exists on that property. The open space easement was required for dedication by the town in 1980 as part of an earlier conditional use permit application that came before the council. And at that point, the council imposed an open space easement on that rear parcel. In the open space easement itself, at paragraph 8, it contemplates that a future council may take action to abandon that open space easement. And that's what you're being asked to do in part by this applicant. The applicant is asking that you modify that open space easement so that 30% of it would be used for the parking space. 70% of the easement, open space easement, would remain. That needs to be done pursuant to findings that are in the government code. Those are called out for you in your staff report. In detail, you will find the rationalization given by the applicant for each of the findings. And when you get to that piece, I'm sure they would be happy to answer any questions about those, and staff would be available to do that as well. If that is approved, there are additional payments that would need to be made by the applicant as part of a reassessment of that property. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point or later on when you get to actually that portion of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
Okay, I'm coming to the end of our introduction before we move to questions. The last thing I wanted to mention was that the application also includes an amendment to the conditional use permit, which would be required and was contemplated by Measure A to allow for the construction of the parking lot and the parklets. To address this question, the amended CUP would establish seating limits for the restaurants. They would be new limits, as Sage mentioned a while ago. It would be 144 for Bucks and 117 for the bakery. And the establishment of those seating numbers was something that the council has consistently over the last couple of years indicated that they would do as part of this review of the use permit. The other issue that the Planning Commission identified as they were deliberating and ultimately recommending this to the town council was that there will, of course, if this is approved, there will be a lag time between approval and construction. And so the existing parking, it will remain the same. And the planning commission thought it was important for the council to discuss interim measures, particularly as it related to the seating at the two restaurants, given the existing parking. And the staff report on pages 28, 29 are some options that staff provided, and I'm going to let Sage talk a little bit about those. And when that is finished, that's going to conclude our introduction. We're available for questions. Your first presenter will be the applicant, who will also be able to answer questions as part of their presentation as well.
Okay, fantastic. So you're saying we should do council questions for staff at this point, and then subsequent to that, we would do the applicant
That's
presentation.
correct. Yes, but Sage, you want to first talk about the interim measure?
So at the hearings, and then most notably at the planning commission hearing, the commission really looked to the council to, whatever decision was made on the project, to really provide direction on what the next step should be. So in particular, if the project is approved, what kind of interim measures should take place? So for example, we have the existing parklets that are out there. Those are the temporary parklets. They would eventually be replaced with the new permanent parklets that are smaller in size than what's out there today. But also the parking doesn't immediately just get constructed. So there will be some time between developing construction plans, getting permit approval, and starting construction. So the council, what staff did, we talked and looked at what potential different options could occur. The council could look at strictly enforcing the conditional use permit seating counts from the 2016 CUP. So that's what's currently in place. And those are those seat counts that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. The council could allow the seat limits up to the approved CUP if that is approved, and whatever seat count is ultimately approved under the CUP update. Now, with that, if more seats are allowed than what's currently allowed under the 2016 permit, should there be other measures that take place? So, for example, there could be parking management measures. Staff noted potential valet parking. The applicant has expressed concerns with doing any valet parking, and that could be expensive and kind of difficult to manage in the back of the parking lot there. So something they may speak to more. And there's other hybrid options to allow expanded hours, say, for the bakery, but keep them to the 95 seats as opposed to going up to the 117 seats. So there's a variety of options that the council could consider. But it is important to at least understand what the interim measures should be, should the project be approved. And if it's not approved, what measures should be taken after that.
Okay, so with that, we will take council questions.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to propose that there's just so much information here to contend with. And I want to make sure that we approach this in an as organized way as possible. So each council member, we have a handout in front of us that kind of goes through the different topics. So it starts with the landscaping and privacy screening, and then goes through the different topics that Sage just touched on. So I would suggest that we structure our questions in that way. So we can go around the table, and I would propose we start off with any questions related to landscaping and privacy screening. And then we can hold time at the end if there's a category that's not addressed here and you have a question that falls into a different category, we can hold time for that as well. So with that, council questions for staff relating to landscaping and privacy screening. We're going to start there. And I'll maybe look down. Paul, would you like to kick us off?
Not yet. Not on that.
No question.
Specifically landscaping and privacy screen.
I had a couple broad questions, actually, just to set the stage, a couple broader questions. Would you mind if we just got clarification from what the staff was just saying?
Go ahead, yeah.
If the council tonight, there's a number of items that it wishes to sort of see some rework on, what happens to the applicant? Do they have to go back through the entire review process, or do they come straight back to council with any modifications?
They would come straight back to council.
Okay, and you mentioned that there were 3 or 4 choices, and one of those was we could modify and approve versus sort of give direction and continue. Where is that line in your mind? Because there's a lot of design elements here that people might want to change.
Yeah, I think I would draw the line, not a hard line, but I think if there are conditions that you wanted to modify, I'll give you an example. I'm not suggesting this is one you want to, but if you decided that having the business hours from 6 to 11 was too many and you wanted to change that from 7 to 10, that's something that could be done and taken action on tonight. But if there are things, I think where there are things on the plans and then the way that the parking works and the landscaping and all that works, where they may need to redraft plans to be clear about what the direction was and how they responded to it, I think that maybe would warrant coming back.
Got it. Thank you. And then just a question on Jean's comments. It's a language comment. Speaking to a lot of constituents, it seems like everybody's trying to interpret what Measure A says or didn't say. And it is on page 77, the exact language. It's got both qualifying language, like such as and may, and then it specifically calls out expansion for outdoor permanent dining. That provides a range of outcomes depending on how you interpret it. So is the language ambiguous and it's up to us to sort of look at it through the lens of the general plan, or is it more specific than that and we need to be thinking about that in some of the parameters tonight?
So let me say that state propositions and citizen initiatives are not always the clearest of legislation. And basic tenet of statutory interpretation is you look at the words and you apply the common sense interpretation of those words.
Okay, got it. That's helpful. All right. Yeah, well, okay, easy. Okay, I guess you're looking for landscaping. Let's go second here.
Want me to go?
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'd be interested in, has the staff explored the idea that I believe Steve Lubin suggested of turning part of the back part, the proposed parking lot, into more of, I'll call it a landscaped architectural style, rural look than strict asphalt on the ground, meaning some planter boxes, some kind of screening, something that makes it look like it's part of the outdoor community, not a parking lot. Have we explored that at all?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I say we haven't. I mean, we got the comment, but we're not the proponents of the project. So it's not for us to, I don't think it's the council's role to pick one or the other. It's not really that kind of a choice.
Okay, I'm not sure what we're being asked to make comments about then.
Well, you've got a proposal from the applicant for a plan, and then you have a comment that says maybe they could do it like this. So one thing that you could do is say, pivoting off Councilmember Domkowski's question is, I would like to see a design that is more reflective of the comments we got from Mr. Lubin. But at this point, we have not analyzed
Without a
that.
question either, but anyway, I would like to see something that would be more conducive to a rural look than a strict asphalt.
You could also ask that to the applicant too, whether they've considered that.
Yeah.
And you will have an opportunity because they'll be up here next to make their presentation. Brian, are you ready?
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe the first one is on the screening. I don't normally think of rose bushes as natural screening, but I don't know that varietal. I guess one of the question is, do we have to have native plants? I mean, most people, if they want screening, they put up 100 English laurels 2 feet apart and they can create 10, 20 feet of screening in 3 or 4 years, right? But I just don't know are we required to put native plants in? Like maples lose their leaves. That's not great screening, right? So, or can we can just say English laurels all the way down. We're making a hedge.
So, given the location of the proposed screen on the west side,
Yeah.
it's right on the border or partially within the stream corridor. So doing any planting within the stream corridor, you want to make sure that it is riparian compatible vegetation. So there's a list that was derived from a biological report from a different property just across the creek. They were at that property restored some of their stream corridor, and that biological report had a list of recommendations. So that was provided in the staff report, as well as the applicant provided that table on the plans, on the landscape plan. So on sheet 7.2, they've integrated that same list into the plans. And so there are different choices there, but it wouldn't be something that would be like an English laurel.
Yes. Okay, that's the, yeah, very back. The 4-foot solid fencing, is that, is there code anywhere around in our system around 4 feet for, is the max you can do for solid? Or if this was, if we wanted to, if we thought there was a conditional need here for 6 feet, we could do that, and it would just be part of this project, would have a 6-foot fence.
That's correct. You could,
Okay.
the code does allow to go up to 6 feet. We were looking at the balance of kind of being able to look through the fence and landscaping a bit, as opposed to just having that solid wall there.
Okay. I think that's it on landscaping. It's a sub topic.
All right, Paul, do you have any questions?
Not yet. I do, but I want to sort of follow your format. I have a lot, but not on that subject.
Okay. I have a couple questions on the landscaping and screening topic. Before Sage, is it possible to flash up what's currently proposed in the conditional use permit related to landscaping screen, so we can just kind of have the words on the screen while we're talking about it?
I'm going to pull up the draft resolution, and that will have the conditions. So we'll get So this number eight, it kind of combines the lighting, the fencing, and the landscaping as for the recommended condition. Oh, sorry, you're not sharing. You're not the only one seeing it. Hold on just a second here.
So number 8. All right, so I understand they proposed a 4-foot tall solid wood fence along the western edge, but we could go up to 6. So that's question's been answered. Question on the screening plants. I also understand they need to be riparian compatible because we're dealing with a stream corridor. And Sage, I know you're not a landscaper, but are you able to comment or provide an opinion on whether or not the number and I don't know, what is a plant, varietal of plant that has been proposed would actually provide privacy screening? Like, I think Councilmember Domkowski was kind of going to a similar place that I was thinking, which is, are these plants actually, we've got a fence, which will determine, however high it might be. But for additional privacy screening, the bushes that are being proposed would need to grow above that and then provide a screen. And so I don't know anything about plants. So I'm wondering, are these riparian compatible plants going to grow quickly and actually provide a dense enough privacy screen so that it would be able to create a visual block between the proposed parking and the neighbors' properties?
You're correct. I'm not an expert in planting. The plants, the size being installed are pretty typical of a shrub. 5 gallon, yet that's pretty small when they first get installed.
So it would take some time to grow. I know the applicant has a lot more experience in landscaping and could probably provide a more detailed answer. The types of plants, you know, how dense they would be in a bush, I couldn't say 100% that you wouldn't be able to see through them or anything like that. But the applicant could probably help better answer that question.
Okay. And then along Kenyatta Road, is there anything, if you could refresh my memory, are there any privacy screening plants proposed along that edge of the property?
There's not any significant amount of landscaping. There's a lot of trees in cover there now, kind of depicted here by these lighter green circles. There would be, you know, and we noted earlier, there would be some of the smaller oak trees to be relocated. And then along with this, we still have the project for the applicant to provide kind of what we call this open space enhancement plan. Some of that open space area would need to be disturbed to construct the project. So kind of putting that back in its place and providing some plants that would be native to the area, that are compatible with the open space in the area. There would be some further work to be done there. But on the specific plan here today, there is not a number of plants being proposed itself, but we still would need that open space enhancement plan.
Okay. I don't have any further questions on the landscaping and privacy screening topic. Anybody? Oh, yep, you're right. Chris and Ned, want to leave you out.
I have no questions on landscaping or screening.
No, I think you guys have covered it pretty well.
All right. The next topic is fences and walls. Does anybody want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, so I'm confused about where we are. I mean, we heard the applicant say that's not correct, so it's hard for me to, I can't ask a lot of questions when I'm not sure what is being proposed.
And sorry, Sage, could you keep the proposed CUP up there so that we can follow along?
It's helpful. So I don't know how to proceed when there's some dispute about what kind of fencing there's going to be.
So you're asking for clarification about what's being proposed.
I don't know how else to do it.
All right, I think that's fair.
Okay.
We can give you clarification.
So I can show you what we saw in the plans. Is that so on the new landscape plan that was submitted, you have a call out here, and this noted for a new 4-foot tall solid redwood fence. So that was pointed to in this area here. This is the line that goes around the corner and stops here. And then in the applicant's response submittal that came in, it specifically noted that they prefer to do the landscaping and not do the 4-foot fence on the west side. So that's the conclusion that we ended up with. We also looked at the elevation, and this elevation was the same elevation we saw with the Core 10, but it changed the materials. So that was the second reason we were led to believe that they were proposing a solid wood fence. I will note that sheet A3, this sheet was not modified in the latest round, and this one still calls out the wire fence in this location. But given the 2 new sheets that were provided show the solid fencing, that led us to believe the solid fencing was being proposed.
So I think we just, when the applicant speaks, I think we should just ask for clarification, because I think we're clear on what we think the answer ought to be, and they should just clarify if that's what
We could pose a comment.
Yeah.
I just.
Yeah, you're not
I want
deliberating now,
peek
so.
it.
My fence question was already answered.
Dick, any questions? All right, Ned and Chris.
No.
No, I'll wait for the applicant. I think I understand what they're proposing.
Okay. All right. Lighting. Any questions related to the lighting plan?
Maybe just
We could go back to the proposed CUP.
so it's just I mean, is there, Can you clarify, is there any lighting requirement in our code? There's no lights in Roberts Markets parking lot, in the front of the shopping center, on the sides of it. There's a couple lights in the back. Some are working, some aren't. No offense. But do we have any requirement for lighting at all that we're driving, or is this the applicant driving it?
Well, I think it's there. I double, triple checked with our building official that the building code does not require outdoor lighting for commercial parking lots. And we don't do a lot of commercial in Woodside. I'm very familiar with knowing that the building department always requires that whenever you have an exit door, and primarily in residences, that you have to have exterior lighting outside of your doors that enter and exiting a building. That is a requirement, and the building official did clarify it's still a requirement. So the exiting door requirements on the building, right next to the building, but those are required. The parking lot lights themselves are not required by building code. The zoning code doesn't have any requirements for lighting. Yet, with all that said, security has been a significant topic of conversation through the process. And so I know that's important to the applicant, it's important to members of the community. Staff shares those concerns. So it's definitely, even at a minimum outside of security, but just to navigate a site at night. I'd leave these meetings sometimes really late, and parking lots on this side, if I park over there, there are no lights over there, and it's really dark. And so just seeing where my car is without my alarm button sometimes is hard to find. So I think there's a balance of trying to make sure there's safe navigation, security, as well as providing, just enough lighting back there.
And we don't have any code on 10-foot high, 5-foot high.
There is a code that has a maximum of 14 feet high.
Maximum.
So there's a maximum height, but other than that.
Dick, any questions related to lighting? All right, no questions from Dick. Looking down to Paul.
What about consideration? You mentioned the lighting impacts on safety and security of people walking to their cars and, that sort of thing. What about the impact on neighbors? Because right now, that was one of the principal complaints that we heard from the neighbors on the western side, is that there's light shining right into their.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely part of the conversation, and that's where this condition falls, is still looking at the lower lights. Whereas the applicant has provided reasonings why the lower lights might be problematic, the parking lot out in front of Independence Hall is noteworthy. There's a couple of about 10-foot tall lights right outside of the building here. As you go further into the parking lot, there are older lights that, newer lights probably could do a little better job than what's out there now. Some of them also not working. But they show area where it might be safely easy to find your car and walk through the parking lot. But then balancing that with security, is that enough? So therefore, the commission still ended up with keeping this condition as part of the project. That would keep them at a 5-foot height.
Okay. And was the main rationale for that? I mean, I understand the reason for light, all the things you mentioned, the impact on neighbors.
That's correct.
Because the fence helps too, but
It was, yes.
obviously something's not working there.
The shorter light fixtures were directly in relation to
less the impact.
minimizing impacts to adjacent property.
Thank you for the clarification.
All right, going over to Chris and Ned. Chris, we'll start with you.
I think a lot of what I want to say is down to deliberation. And I think the number one question that's already been answered is lighting required, and fairly surprising to find out it's not. So I'm good right now.
All right, Ned?
Yeah, I have a question for Sage, and I don't know if you can answer this. This might be for the applicant, but the few construction defect cases I learned that there's basically an industry standard for everything. So I was wondering, for lighting, is there some kind of industry standard for parking lots that, rather than us kind of guessing at 5 foot versus 10 foot or 12 foot, is there, kind of something that every small shopping center does that we could look to, rather than us kind of making something up on the spot?
And no, I don't have that information. I am a little familiar with,
the Kelvin scale and brighter versus more warmer lights. And, staying under 3000 Kelvin is a good thing when trying to reduce, very bright white light impacts. But in terms of an industry standard, the applicant probably has more experience and could probably speak to that a little better.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I had one question related to lighting. Oh yeah, so I'm not seeing anything in paragraph 8 around maintenance of lighting. Is there any obligation in the proposed CUP around keeping, if, to the extent we were to require any lighting, or there was legacy lighting there that was allowed to stay? Is there any obligation on the applicant to maintain that lighting in good working order?
It's a good question. Obviously, whatever is related to building code, so things on the building that might be around exiting, that's probably something that could be enforced should those not be properly maintained. Otherwise, it would be looking for some type of condition with the kind of the overall commercial center itself. And I'm just quickly looking through here. I don't recall something specifically about maintaining lighting, but just kind of going through.
And if we wanted to add to, so if lighting were a part of this and we wanted to add a condition around keeping the lighting in proper working order, we could do that?
Yes, definitely, especially it's directly related to this application.
Okay, no more questions for me on lighting. Anybody else? Any last call for lighting questions? All right, we're gonna go to the topic of security and the security plan. Can you point us to the paragraph in the proposed CUP on security, Sage?
This is condition 1L. So it's looking at installing some additional signage, noting the hours of operation, prohibiting non-employee parking outside of established business hours. And then this is the area about maintaining security barriers. So if that's something that were not to be part of this project, then this condition would need to be modified. And lastly, it talks about installing and maintaining, in this case, security cameras at the rear parking lot, and then also to provide some after-hour security patrols.
All right. Maybe going to our colleagues on Zoom, Ned and Chris. Would you like to jump in here with questions related to security?
I'll go. This is, I guess, related to security, but to the extent Sage or anyone else can answer, have there been discussions with the applicant about, and this is anecdotal, but I think a lot of those cars in the Kenyatta Corners parking lot are cyclists who park and go for a ride. And I wondered if there's any, I don't know if, anything that the town can do or the property owners could do to kind of clear up those spaces for people who are not actually using the stores and restaurants services. And I don't know if that's something that is even allowed to kind of select people to leave, and some people could stay, but it does seem like cyclists staying for hours at a time is a problem.
So it's a private parking lot owned by a private entity. And so as with many cities, you drive around and go into private parking lots. They may have signs posted about towing vehicles after a certain amount of hours or unauthorized vehicles. So any type of enforcement of non-patrons to the shopping center would be up to the property owner.
Okay, thanks.
I'll jump in. Sage, at the Planning Commission meeting, I think this is where the topic of security cameras came up, and I'm assuming that those would be mounted on top of the light posts. I believe that's in the packet. I guess my question is, when the Planning Commission was talking about this, it's, is the security issue something happening with cars, or is it happening on what is the easement outside of the parking area? Because, I think it's the security issues are a mix of things. And, has any consideration been given to trying to identify what's happening not inside the parking lot, i.e. employees of restaurants or other businesses in the town center area that may be parked there, staying after hours and having dinner or carrying on. So it's more a question of, I get the idea of security cameras, but has any consideration been on pointing cameras towards the easement?
Not specific conversations. I was out at the site, I don't know, I guess last week, and the security camera. There are security cameras currently on the west side of the building, and those face towards the trail. And so there hasn't been a specific discussion about kind of where those cameras would be pointed towards, and we have not had that conversation with the applicant.
Okay, would there be any kind of privacy issues if that were something council wanted to pursue, to also keep an eye on the non-paved area of the easement?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing in our codes or laws that would prohibit that, but yes, it's something the council may want to consider with regard to.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
I'm wondering if this is one we can help out on a little bit. Can we direct the sheriff that would to do a nightly patrol through the parking lots between 10 and 11 o'clock, which is a lot scarier than pretty much anything else we could probably offer up to any young kid that's in a parking lot?
We could.
We could.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's one we can help with. What is the definition of a security barrier? Is that everything from a little tiny chain to a gate? I mean,
So yeah, it was left vague that way specifically for that purpose. Yeah, so I mean, something as simple as a chain, which, wouldn't be very secure should a vehicle try to pass through it, but yet it really identifies for the majority of the public that they would not cross that area. Whereas something more complicated, expensive, and, practical would be, or maybe less practical, would be a larger gate, whether you're having swinging gates or sliding gates, where can these things fit in? And that could be much more difficult to actually accomplish.
Dick, any questions related to security?
No, I think the question I was going to ask is about the sheriff, the use of the sheriff. And I think that's probably the easiest, simplest thing to do is, if nothing else, maybe you offer him a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock.
All right, Chris, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Brian brought up a great point. I know that we use private security for securing and opening Barkley Fields, and can you speak to A, how that works, B, has there been any issues with it, and C, were there, security issues going on that initiated us working with an outside contractor to do it? And if, you can see where this is going, that might be a secondary way of dealing with it, if the sheriff isn't able to control security issues.
I'm going to assume that question is directed to me. And the town has contracted with Woodside Patrol since the park opened, and it was actually a condition of approval from when the town approved the park. It was one of the things that was required. So we've had them from the outset. They open the gate in the morning, they lock the gate in the evening, they make passes in the overnight hours to make just to put eyes on the park. So they were not called in because there was an identified issue. It was built in from the beginning to prevent any issue. And so when it's coincidence or not, what they have helped with has been, and at least in my experience, where they've been beneficial is alerting us to issues like you have a water leak at 2 a.m., which we wouldn't know otherwise, but there have been very few security issues there. But it's been in place since 2007 or 8.
Great, thank you.
Maybe on that point real quick though, I mean, there's a financial burden then, right? Because as I recall, we're paying like $100 a day for Barkley, right? That's $3,000 a month. It's like a subscription charge we would be putting on somebody that they would have to.
It's a monthly, I want to say it's now about 3,500, maybe a little less than that, but 3,500 a month.
Right.
For that daily patrol.
Yeah, so I just want to make that point that if you went down that route, you'd be adding a $40,000 annual cost to maintaining a lot in that manner. So it seems a little, well, no comment.
All right, I have a question around noise monitoring. So I'm looking at paragraph L and it's saying the property owner shall install and maintain security cameras in the rear parking lot. I assume we could expand that to require security cameras in the entire complex, right?
Yes.
And then, and I guess I also assume we could require that those security cameras remain on and not only like do a visual monitoring, but also monitor for noise. Is that something that the council could include as well?
I'm not familiar with the different types of technology, but if that's something that's available, something that could be considered.
Okay. All right. Any further questions on security?
Yes, following up on your point, I didn't realize noise was going to be involved in that and monitoring. It should. So I do notice that in the conditions, there's amplified sound and non-amplified sound. Amplified sound is prohibited, but non-amplified sound during business hours is. Can you comment on that? Because I think noise has been a
Sure.
issue for neighbors.
So it's something that just the staff recommended initially. We've dealt with this at other quasi-commercial uses. And so it was important that this topic is addressed one way or the other. And so initially, these parklets are something that didn't exist prior to being a temporary installation. So because we're looking at this as if there were not parklets there, staff just recommended that no amplified or non-amplified music be allowed. And then as it went to the Planning Commission, there was discussion about that. And at least one commissioner strongly felt that there should be at least non-amplified music allowed, and the other commissioners agreed. So therefore, the complete restriction was modified to what you see there today for the non.
With no limit to just during business hours, not less than business hours. Okay.
All right, we're going to move on to trail access and improvements. I'm going to look left this time.
Yeah, but this way, I didn't either.
I'll jump in for a second. I'm wondering if we had any thought about what to do about electric scooters and bikes as related to access to the trails.
It's a good question. So bikes, well, bikes in general were discussed.
Electric bikes
Yeah,
are not the same.
I mean, we've talked to, it was talked about. There was no discussion about, parsing out the difference between some type of motorized bike or scooter versus a non-motorized. I was simply strongly encouraged for the different modes of transportation that in particular the children use to get back and forth were allowed to continue. And I'll say from my own personal experience on some of my different site visits out there, especially around 3 o'clock or so, I've seen a number of electric bikes and scooters go through there.
Thank you. Sage, before we dive into this topic, can you direct us to which letter we should be looking at?
So this letter 10 here, so if the project is approved, there are technical documents that need to be prepared. So these have to do with like the legal descriptions of the exact measurements of easements for trails and open space and sewer locations, those kinds of things. So that needs to be identified. And along with that is language. So language kind of goes with kind of what's restricted or allowed with easements. So in this here, it's looking at using the multi-use trail and double check to see if there's another specific condition. Then the other condition here, 7, had to do with the multi-use trails on the outside of the site. So 10 would really address making sure that the language itself, that would be kind of a ministerial action that has to come back to the council to make sure that the legal descriptions will have our surveyors look at all of that, and all of that would be identified before being recorded.
One more question. The trail that is across, is along Kenyatta Road, is that a multi-use trail?
I believe it is. It goes into the corner of the southeast corner of the site. Just kind of point to this area here. Back in the 80s, when they put the different easements on the property, one of the cases was to actually put equestrian, pedestrian, and bicycle easement that's kind of at this corner of the property. You kind of see this dashed line here. And so what the applicant's done is to fit the kind of move the trail further away from the roadway. And so given that easement language, it seems pretty clear it's allowed for all uses.
Maybe following up on Councilmember Brown's comment, we could specifically, of course, post signs that say we prohibit all motorized. Yes.
Yes, signs can be posted.
Right, and we do not prohibit that on multi-use trails today in Woodside. We allow people to go ripping through on those things.
This is a newer phenomenon, and I'm not sure
All
where
right.
that comes up yet.
Put that one on the calendar.
All right, no questions from Paul. Ned, any questions from you? Chris? You're shaking your head.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Just a couple questions from me. What is the applicant proposing in terms of material on the trail, the one that's on the western, or are they proposing anything?
I don't know if those details have been worked out yet. All of this with the construction plans, we want to be to the satisfaction of the town engineer and engineering department. But the applicant can probably also speak to that a little bit better. Nothing is really, there's a section called out on the trail plan.
Because it's just, as far as I can recall, it's just dirt right now.
So the applicants noted here with blue rock over the existing grade, and given the construction expertise the applicant has, they can probably better speak to what that means. There's different areas where it's gravelled. If you go on the Kenyatta Road Trail, that's more compacted type of gravel. Along certain parts of the bank towards Woody the Fish, becomes kind of a mixture of gravel and dirt. So that's what's up.
I'm no expert on trails, but I do recall at some point we improved the town improved the Kenyatta Road Trail specifically with compacted gravel because that was the best material for multi-use. Is that right?
It's possible. It's a little bit outside of what I've done. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Kevin, do you remember?
I don't recall.
Okay. That's my recollection. And then I just want to understand the Kenyatta Road and Woodside Road Trail. What is the current proposal there? I think I heard that we could require improvements there and 2 crosswalks.
So that's what the applicant has proposed in response to the comments. So early on, these comments were provided, and the applicant quickly responded to that. Looking at, there might be you could also put signage there for, I would say probably maybe even better for the people using the trail, saying kind of caution, cars incoming one way or the other. But it's the applicant's proposal to improve the trail and provide those crosswalks to the location shown earlier.
Okay, and are there any maintenance requirements related to the trail near Woody the Fish and the Kenyatta Road and Woodside Road Trail?
I don't know if Kevin knows more about the stuff that's outside of the easement. We'd look at the easement documents himself for anything, if there's any maintenance.
I guess I was asking about the proposed conditional use permit. Are there anything in there related to maintenance of the trails?
There is not. My understanding is typically the town maintains trails, but I'll defer.
But maintenance on a private property?
Yeah, no, typically when an easement is granted to the town for a trail, that's part of what we get is the maintenance responsibility.
Okay, so it'd be the town's responsibility to maintain.
Yeah, the typical would be applicant installs, we maintain.
Okay. Thank you. All right, any other questions on this topic?
Project or
No, just the trail access and improvements. All right, So the next topic on our sheet is interim measures. I think there might be a couple other topics we might want to cover before we get to interim measures. I would propose talking about the seating proposal.
So the CUP in general and I have some questions for the town attorney about Measure A. So those are the two things not on this list at all.
Sorry, what is your list of?
The only thing I have is the conditional use permit. I'd actually want to hear from the public, which is I've reserved my questions, anxious to hear from them. But I do have questions specifically about Measure A and about conditional use permit.
Okay, so why don't we tackle CUP and Measure A next?
Okay. Want me to go?
Yep, go for it.
So this is for the town attorney about Measure A. I've got the text here. We've heard a lot from folks in the town, understandably, about what Measure A says and doesn't say. It addresses the municipal code section 153.113, which prohibits using residential parcels for commercial purposes, and Measure A, as I understand it, we haven't talked about this, carves out a very specific limited exception to this prohibition on a single parcel.
Correct.
Okay. So first, let me read the part of the code that prohibits using residential parcels for commercial use. And that is, quote, parcels zoned residential in or adjoining the town center may not be used to facilitate or support commercial use of other parcels, including parking or access. That's the overall part of the code. Then the key section of Measure A, at least the key section for me, which carves out the exception, is with this sentence. It's subparagraph 4, which says, except assessor's parcel number 072-162-350, located behind Kenyatta Corners, which may be improved with facilities subject to duly issued conditional use permits, such as surface parking to accommodate permanent outdoor dining within Kenyatta Corners, trails, and play structures. Very awkwardly worded sentence if I do make a comment, but I'll put that aside for the time being. So the question that I have is that some people claim we must approve parking because Measure A requires us to do so. So since this ballot measure wasn't very long, it's only a couple of sentences were added to the code, and I assume the drafters of Measure A chose their words pretty carefully, but the word that they used in the key section of Measure A, which I emphasized, was the word may. You said we're supposed to use the everyday meaning of the word may. So this parcel may be improved with surface parking. So does Measure A require us to approve parking, or does it just permit us to do that if we want to? In other words, are we required to put in parking, or is it optional?
What Measure A did was indicated that parking is an authorized use on this site.
And I understand that, but that wasn't my
So
question.
it's a zoning designation.
So are we required to do it?
An applicant has the right now to propose a parking lot on that parcel.
But do we have to approve it?
You have in front of you a resolution. First of all, let me step back and say you have an application. And you look at that application now because they have brought you an application posing a use which is, the use is authorized, consistent with the zoning for that parcel.
Okay. But look, we just went through the housing element here about, we've changed parcels from zoning from open space to multifamily housing, but we didn't have to put them in. We changed the zoning. We ultimately did. They're authorized through the zoning, but we haven't permitted anything yet, and we may never permit it. I mean, it's up to us. Doesn't that same principle apply here?
It applies to any project that comes before you. When a project comes before you, if it is an authorized use, staff brings it to you and you have to analyze whether or not the applicant has met all of the requirements that are necessary for, in this instance, I won't list them all, but the grading application, the variances, the design review, those are all part and parcel of this application.
So that's up to us to make that determination.
That's right. And those findings are all listed out for you in the staff report, the findings that would need to be made to approve the project.
That was consistent with what I thought. So it's good to know, because I think a lot of these issues are being inflated for whatever reasons. By the way, adore outdoor dining it, so I'm not against that. So the key section also mentioned the phrase subject to duly issued conditional use permits. So that's a predicate necessary before we approve this.
Yes, this indicates that a parking lot would be a conditional use. As you know, in your zoning ordinances, you have some permitted uses and then you have some conditionally permitted uses. And what this measure did was established a parking lot as a conditionally permitted use.
So let me clarify that, because that's not quite the way I'm interpreting it, but you went to law school. I just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So on this particular issue, is the conditional use permit only apply to the parking lot, or does it apply to the project?
The center has a conditional use permit already. Not each individual business, but the center has a conditional use permit.
Understand.
And this parking lot is part of the center, so they are bringing you this as an amendment to their conditional use permit because this measure, which was passed by the voters, indicates that someone can propose a parking lot as a conditional use, i.e. you have to go through the conditional use permit process as part of the application to build a parking lot.
So is the conditional use permit that's before us, that conditional use permit for this particular, for these businesses?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. That is, again, consistent with what I thought. Okay, thank you. And my last question, because I do want to get to the public comment quickly. Did Measure A inform voters that the assessor's parcel, this specific parcel, had been zoned for open space since 1979? And do you think that was, well, I'll just leave, I'll just end it there.
That is not part of the language of Measure A.
Okay. No other questions?
Any other questions related to understanding the posture of the conditional use permit and Measure A?
A couple, but I just want one follow-up on something that Councilmember Gold just asked. Unlike a normal project, this is a project that, happens once every 35 years. It's a ballot measure. And I'm not sure if this is what you're asking, but I thought what you were asking is this the will of the people? We have to find a project that can work, not necessarily the project before us, but ultimately we need to approve a project that responds to what the people have voted on. We don't have the right to not follow a citizen-led ballot measure, correct?
Well, you would not have the right to say to this property owner, now you may never put a parking lot there because the voters have said that that's a use that is authorized for that area.
Okay.
But
yes, sir.
More questions?
I just wanted, yes, this would be maybe for Councilmember Domkowski, and that is.
Sorry, Paul, I'm just going to stop you. Questions for staff. We will have plenty of time to deliberate. Okay.
I have a mind.
Question for
Yeah.
staff?
Yes, they do. This is really about tables 4 and 6. And it's around the calculation for the proposed CUPs on the restaurants, which is of course driven by the traditional retail square footage per parking space calculation where we're 150 square feet per space. And what caught my eye, and I think caught the eye of a lot of other people, is that this ratio produces some outcomes that aren't particularly logical. 27 spots to Emily Joubert, 36 spots to the hardware store, and so forth. Those allocations appear a little bit disconnected from reality, which then makes me wonder if this 1 to 150 is a ratio that is lost in time a little bit. And you appear to try to answer this in table 6, where you say, hey, here's what everybody else is doing, and then you see that Woodside's at the very bottom, the most restrictive at 1 to 150, and then it goes all the way to 1 to 200. So I guess one of the questions is there any reason whether we should be re-examining whether that ratio makes sense given all the changes in technology and post-pandemic changes in the way we work, and then this table that shows what our peers are doing? Shouldn't we be re-examining that as part of a public study session before taking the output to drive what these CUPs might be for restaurants? Is there opinion that why aren't we doing that? Maybe that's the right way to ask that
And
question.
before you answer, could you please flash up so we can all look at it?
Well, I was going to answer that we're analyzing a use permit given the code that we've got today. We don't
Okay.
have a change, and they have an application which I think we're obligated to look at and to come to a decision on. An attorney has whispered in my ear that, however, you could stop and say, wait, this doesn't make sense. And we want to look at the parking ratios before we make that decision. So, am I? Yeah.
And then to Councilmember Gold's question, the CUPs the conditional use permits have to be approved before the zoning? Does that hold up everything if we want to reopen the way we calculate CUPs? I mean, obviously, that means nothing happens tonight. We're in a continuation, but, okay. I might be mixing
No, I'm
storylines.
getting my voice on this side. So,
You know, you've got a good question.
just give me a second.
You have to kibitz a little bit. We need to-
Question. You're right, okay. All right, so it sounds like maybe if you wanted to deal with the parking standards and their applicability in this case, you could do a variance to the parking standards for the required, how do I put this? The requirement number of spaces, right, versus their size dimensions. So you could do that as part of this application.
We could also go back and change the municipal code
You could.
for the entire town and apply it everywhere. Okay.
Yep.
I think you probably answered my next three questions then. But it is such a foundational part of the discussion that if we want to do it, we could just simply agendize a study session, a public session that goes through different scenarios for traditional retail square footage to space. And that would help and then inform us about how many spaces are actually available as a residual for table 4 to try to figure out where CUPs should actually land for the restaurants. You know what I'm saying?
I think,
We can agendize it, is what you're saying.
yes.
We could do it in December
Yeah.
if we wanted to. Okay.
I'm going to kind of follow that question up. I'm concerned about the same question when I look at the chart in table 4, and I see no employee parking seems to be required for either Bucks or Village Bakery. I don't quite understand that.
These are formulas that are derived that would take into account employee parking. So this, for restaurants, they looked at the number of seats, whereas even with the retail, I get back to table 4 here. Even with the retail, it's not a 1-for-1 for employee. So that's taken into account some of the square footage that they're looking at. It's just the formulas based the way they decided this is the way you look at parking, and that should provide generally enough spaces for employees as well as customers. Again, you know, the retail doesn't say 1 per employee. It's 1 for every 3 employees. So unless we're assuming all employees are carpooling together, it's kind of grouping in that 150 square feet of retail as part of what may account for the rest of it.
Sounds like a swag to me. I guess the other thing I'm asking would be, have we looked at, or has anybody looked at what is really driving the increased business at Bucks and the Village Bakery? I know everybody's talked about outdoor dining, but outdoor dining was driven by COVID, where more people were living at home and working at home, and therefore, when they're at home, they're going to likely go out to eat more often. And I'd like to know if that's a factor, because that factor is not going away. It's only going to increase. And I don't want us to make a policy decision ratio set up now. We haven't done our homework on what the basic factors are that's driving this increase.
Yeah, we don't have an analysis of the specific increases based on the parkings that are out there today.
Do we know if any of the parking that's been going on in the back lot right now is for so I say north side customers and employees? In other words, are employees of other parts of the complex on the south side also parking back there?
If you're referring to Roberts Market, that's a separate property. So that's not taking into account any of the requirements of the market. The way this code is set up is set to be dealt with on that site. Whereas, as we noted earlier, if there's any parking on site, that would be up to the owner to determine how that's being enforced. If people go out there for bicycle rides, to walk to the church, to school, for any of those reasons, the library, that's just not something that's contemplated within the code.
All right, Chris, I see your hand up.
Yep, sorry about that. I'm going to go back to Brian's question regarding the parking ratios and the formulas used to derive them, but I want to go up a little higher. And it's right there on the screen in front of you. You know, sorry, I'll form this in the phrase or make it in the form of a question. Sage, how many existing parking spaces do we have today on October 22nd?
155.
Okay. So, and the chart in front of us and I know nobody's going to want to talk about overseating or any kind of things like that later in public comment. But if everyone was exactly at what they're supposed to be doing, how many parking spaces are required today on October 22nd?
I'd have to go back and check the.
It's on the chart.
Total required, they're showing 186.
Okay, so we are currently operating under the capacity we're supposed to have for parking at Kenyatta Corners, correct?
That's
by
correct.
31 spaces by advanced math. Okay.
When they and in 2016 that was noted, and because there were no changes to the seating or hours, there was no need to correct the nonconformity.
Okay, but right now we have not enough parking for our current CUP.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I think reopening is a good idea at some point here. Actually, can I ask one more question, Jen?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Sorry to be pedantic about this. So the proposed new parking would bring us into compliance for the existing CUP, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. I mean, we'll stay on this topic. Any further questions on the tables here or parking, seat allocation,
CUP.
CUP?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm assuming this is for Sage. So currently the bakery has, its CUP calls for 70 seats during the day and an additional 25 at night, for a total of 95, correct?
That's correct.
And they're proposing going to 117 seats at all times. We changed, I guess unofficially, the town council modified that, at least through a resolution for the pandemic, to allow, to permit outdoor seating during the pandemic. Did that change the capacity at all?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think the understanding was that indoor seating would move outdoors.
It didn't, I believe it did not.
It did not increase the allowed amount of seats, I guess.
So it was still 70 and 95. And as I recall it, because it was one of the first meetings that I attended, I remember folks from the bakery and Emily Joubert and several of the businesses came in here, and they said they had issues with the parking, of course. And if I'm not mistaken, the McNiven brothers from Bucks mentioned that they were trying to balance what they were doing. So in other words, they were going to stay within their number, but they would balance what was outside with what was inside and never exceed that number.
Yeah, they made a statement at the last meeting that they were close to that number, that sometimes the seat count may be over.
Yeah.
And then there's been a lot of public testimony about the bakery.
So, do you know, is the bakery in compliance with that number today?
I have not gone out there to check.
I'm sorry?
Have not verified that.
Shouldn't we know that? I mean, we've got this chart right here and we're assuming that's correct. I mean, we should know.
The application. The application we have.
All right, we will get to, we will get to public comment.
So the application, what we're looking at is the application we have before us and what's being proposed. Looking at an enforcement action would be a kind of a separate, but.
Yeah, and I'm not, because I think the council made a decision not to enforce during that time. When did that expire?
The temporary CUP, March 1st, 2024.
So, yeah, I think that's right. I think it was earlier this year.
It was March 1st. I just got my years sometimes mixed up.
So my last question is, does the town normally review applications for new or additional projects during a time when a property owner is out of compliance with their existing permit?
It depends on where that is.
You can give me an example of that ever happening?
Yeah, go ahead, Gene.
I can give you an example. The Planning Commission, I think it was last year, heard an application from the church, Village Church, to amend their CUP. They were operating the hub and they had nothing in their use permit that would have allowed for that, and the town had received a number of complaints about that operation. And so we indicated to them, as has been done here, you need to come in and right-size your CUP and let the public have an opportunity to comment on whether that's an appropriate use or not. They did that, and the Planning Commission did approve an amendment to that CUP to allow the hub to operate. And they were out of compliance when they came in for that CUP amendment.
Okay, I appreciate the answer, but that's not the question I asked.
Sorry.
So I asked if somebody could do a new and expanded application while their existing permit was, I'll give you an example. I have a neighbor who was building a retaining wall. Sage and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and they were red tagged and they were out of commission for 3 months, but they also wanted to build a pool in the backyard. You wouldn't hear that until they got their retaining wall permits up to speed. And
We've allowed those two things to be combined as long as the application has the correction.
but they couldn't proceed with the pool until they came into compliance with the retaining wall. That was the.
I don't know the specifics of that, but yes, it's
Oh, that was
possible.
it.
We've had applications that varied.
So my question again is, if somebody's out of compliance with the terms of their permit, we're entertaining an additional expanded use.
And just, I think we just have a unique situation here in which. we
Unique
had-
is the word, yeah.
We had a kind of a series of events. So we had the
Wait,
pandemic.
let's let Sage answer.
We had the pandemic that then created the outdoor dining. And if all may recall, that actually went completely across the parking lot. It was much larger originally. And that got scaled back. And then we had Measure A, and then we had the submittal of this application. And so given those kind of 3 steps that kind of concurrently happened, we got to the point where it's okay, let's process this application. The process in this application took a little bit longer than expected. And so that's where we find ourselves today.
And I would just add one thing, that when this came before council in comment, the comment back was always, we will take this up as part of this application. And I certainly didn't understand it to be that there were any constraints on what they could ask to do.
I agree. But I mean, this has been going on for 2.5 years. I mean, that's a long time to wait to resolve an issue. But I just wanted to sort of, I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. So the current conditional use permit for the bakery is a maximum of 95 seats. I thought they had 170, and now I learned tonight they have 210. So they're way out of compliance with that. And yet we're now we're talking about a conditional use permit for additional uses and additional parklets and additional parking. I'm not asking for an answer, it's rhetorical.
Okay, we're gonna. Any more questions, Paul? All right, we will hopefully be getting to public comment very soon. I think did not cover the topic of interim measures. So I want to make sure we hit that before we move on to the applicant presentation. Anybody have any questions related to interim measures?
No.
For staff?
No, there's no questions. I have no questions.
Chris and Ned?
No questions.
So interim measures, I think everybody is referring to overseating. But that could also extend to non-Kenyatta Corners parking for use of going for a walk or bathing your dog or any of the above or riding your bike. Could we, as if this project gets approved, come up with some sort of definitive enforcement mechanism? I don't know what the exact form of that is, but could that be a commitment on our part? And I think that's more of a question for Kevin than it is for Sage.
Yes, we could do that.
Okay.
All right. I don't have any questions right now on interim measures. So I think we are going to go next to the presentation from the applicant. So I would invite you up to make your presentation. So Lee, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and letting us know what your role is, I'd appreciate that.
After a few meetings, I've got this. I'm too short. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council members. My name is Lee Prince. I'm a land use attorney assisting the applicant. And here tonight also is Dave Tanner, who's the expert on the plans, who can answer a lot of those questions, as well as Christine Roberts, who can answer some of the questions about operational issues. So we have a quick presentation tonight. Hopefully it's going to be a long night. I don't want to take too much of your time, and you have definitely heard some of what I'm going to say already from Sage. So this project has been designed not only to benefit Kenyatta Corners, but to benefit the community. So parklets and parking are providing community benefits and also part of the process since we started going to committee meetings, ASRB meetings, and the Planning Commission is responding to community concerns. So first I'm going to go through some of the community benefits. So the permanent outdoor dining, the parklets are a community benefit. In 2020 during COVID, the outdoor dining became an important community amenity. In 2021, the voters approved Measure A to rezone and allow the rear parcel at Kenyatta Corners to be improved with surface parking and to accommodate the permanent outdoor dining. I do want to note that as a point of clarification, the property behind Kenyatta Corners isn't actually zoned open space. It's still zoned R for residential. It's just subject to that open space easement, which does allow the modification. And then I do also want to add another little point of clarification that the parklets that are existing will actually be reduced in size slightly from what there is now when the project is completed. So that should help corral the seating a little bit as well. So I'm going to try, if I have random clarifications throughout my presentation to answer some of the things I heard. But if at any point you have questions, please feel free to ask. Is that the next one? Did you go? Okay, yeah, so the next benefit here is what I like to refer to as right sizing the parking. So 15 spaces need to be added for the existing permitted uses on site. 19 spaces are added for the new parklet spaces. That's a total of 34 new spaces over what is there. In the community's process to develop the current general plan, residents expressed a strong continued desire to address circulation issues and to encourage commercial services and facilities that meet their day-to-day needs. Included in both the land use and circulation elements of the town are policies to improve commercial district circulation, traffic flow, and parking. I do want to kind of touch a little bit on the idea that we could stop and take a look at the zoning code and reevaluate parking requirements, I do feel strongly that this application is one that's in front of you and should be evaluated based on the standards that are in place. If you stop here and go through a process to relook at that, it feels a little bit like a moratorium that you're imposing on development while you go ahead and look at that without making the proper findings. So just encourage you to take a look at what you've got. There are very few parcels in town that are zoned commercial. You really can address the need for parking with this project because you're adding parking, which will be an improvement, and you can deal with it through this use permit process. It does meet the general plan policies as well as the current zoning requirements. There was a question about considering looking the rear lot look a little bit more commercial. I know Dave will, or look a little bit more rural. I know Dave will touch on this. He's the guru about the plans, but I will note that he's worked very hard to address fire, circulation, and other concerns, and to really fit just the right number of spaces for the needs of this center into the space. And this is really what works. And I'm pretty sure he's going to stand up and tell you that if we try and modify things and add planter boxes, we'll lose the parking and the ideal number of parking spaces that have been put together. So also a community benefit is the multi-use easement. So I just kind of want to go through the process a little bit here. I want to make sure that the council understands that this has been an iterative process. Currently, people are using a path. You can see that path A in red. It's not dedicated to the town. It's just what's sort of become used in the open space easement. It's at about a 6.8% grade. At the Open Space and the Trails Committee meeting, the applicant heard concerns about students biking to school, about the angle of Path B. So Path B is where the current dedicated equestrian easement is. It makes a sharp right-hand turn, and there were some folks who were concerned about their kids having to make that sharp turn on a bike. So when we came back to the Planning Commission, that curve got softened as an alternative. So definitely paid attention there. And again, the grade is 5.3%. And looked at California state standards on trails, and these are all percentage grades that are well within reasonable for children to ride bikes on. The other alternative that the applicant proposed, which is really the one that's preferred at this point, is that meandering path that's closer to the existing easement. It's great because it pulls the path further away from the neighbors, which allows us to retain more landscape screening. It's also at approximately 6% grade, so there are no issues there. Dave can talk about the materials, but the intent here is to make it something that's appropriate for safe routes to school so that all users can use this trail. And then last but not least, on the community benefits, there was a lot of questions and talk about it, but there are improvements being proposed for the pedestrian path and walkway and crosswalks to make this a safer place for the community as a whole. So then responding to community concerns, I'll kind of keep hitting it. The applicant really has been listening to the things that are being said at these public meetings. And we have reached out to folks and talked to them about what their concerns are. And so we have proposed some screening options. There really is a preference not to over-screen. It might feel like commercial uses are made of money, but they're not. And so the preference here is to pick one option. And Dave will talk more about it, but the solid wood fence is really just where you see that colorful line of flowers. But the idea would be to put some landscape screening there or do the fence and not necessarily do both. And I also want to note here that in addition to things like landscape screening, you can also think about noise screening. And the applicant has been very amenable and agreed to restricting delivery hours to make sure that residents are not impacted by noise. Now, security and lighting, I put them kind of hand in hand. Adequate lighting is an element of security. The applicant originally proposed 14-foot height lights, which is consistent with the municipal code maximum. There are some of those lights on site now. The applicant then lowered to 12 feet and is now down to 10 feet. We believe that 10-foot lighting provides better lighting, which provides for better security than the 5-foot fixtures. These light fixtures are proposed at the center of the parking area so that the least amount of sight will reach towards the property line shared with the neighbors. Any potential spill will be further reduced by the screening or the fence that would get, the landscape screening or fence that would get installed. And as you can see, the kind of curved lines that are on that graphic show where the light would tend to spill to, which is within the confines of the parking lot itself. And that red line that you see there is the creek setback, the corridor, which is approximately 50 feet from the neighboring property line. Now, I understand they're going to come and talk about like differences in grade, but it's still a fairly significant distance from the neighbor's property. And then just as for a piece of perspective on, treating all applicants similarly, maximum of 14-foot height applies as well to residential properties doing things like developing tennis courts. And then we did take a quick look, and Dave will talk more about this too, but I think the typical height for a parking lot light is about 15 feet for a smaller parking lot. And then neighbors, we talked about security cameras. Taller poles provide a better location in which to install the cameras. I think if they're 5-foot poles, I'm not sure where those types of security cameras get installed. I also don't think that, from what I've understood from the public comment, that after like easement, folks on the easement aren't the concern, cyclists aren't the concern. It was more concern about people staying late after work and maybe having a beverage and hanging out and listening to a little bit of music. We heard that concern. Christine has Woodside Patrol going out a few times to see what they can see and report back to her to see what needs to happen. And to the extent those are employee issues, then those will be dealt with. And then finally, with respect, you can leave that one up, that's fine. Relative to the request for a barrier, we continue to request that this condition not be imposed. It might be a reasonable condition for a single tenant building or for a park that's owned and operated by a single entity, but it's not really practical for a multi-tenant shopping center. And then finally, before I turn it over to Dave to talk about some of those details, I will just remind you, this isn't a code enforcement action. The decision before you tonight is an application about parking and parklets. The existing number of seats, as Sage mentioned, will be reaffirmed with some simplified hours, and then additional parklet seating will be approved, and then parking spaces compliant with the code requirements for those uses will be approved. Once approved, the property does need to comply with those requirements. We understand that, the town understands that, and I think at this point, everyone's looking to make sure that that gets enforced. And we are willing to do what needs to happen during construction to make sure that happens, whether that's reducing seating, inside, outside, however that works. I think there is some concern about valet parking just because we're not familiar with that, and we just really need to understand implementation and a lot more around that. But at a high level, that's pretty much it. Happy to answer any questions, and we'll turn it over to Dave to talk about the fencing and some of those other details. Thank you.
Why don't we have Dave come up and then we can reserve questions for both Dave and.
Sorry, I broke my foot, so I have a hard time getting up. Well, I don't know where to start with every question I heard you guys had. So one, I want to clarify for the wood fence, the 4-foot wood fence was only to go on the west side. I didn't pick it up when my detailer put it on the wrong side of the plans. But sorry. Is that any better? All right. Got a crusty little voice here. So the 4-foot was a mistake. I didn't pick up on the last colored set, and I submitted the Sage at the last minute. Anyway, so I know you all have a lot of questions. So I'd like whoever wants to start first.
All right, council questions for the applicant. Brian, do you want to?
Me, so I'll start. So have you had a chance to take a look at the Lubin concept map, the overlay that puts a couple of tree wells in and mitigates some parking on the west side to lower the impact on the neighbor? Do you have any thoughts on that if you've seen it?
That was not submitted to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And I also looked at trying to put in islands in there.
Yeah.
And there was no room for it at all. To keep up with the standards of parking, if you go to an architectural standard book, they call out certain sizes, certain widths of everything. I was constrained by the creek corridor and the sewer easement and the construction of the retaining wall. So if I could have gotten them in, boy, I would put them in. I love it, but there was no room to put them in. I've also seen plans that Lubin had putting a road right through there too, to make a loop around town. So
Okay.
anyway,
As we consider some of the concerns that some of the more impacted constituents have, the other side of that is with a business hat on, is the question of cost effectiveness of a project in terms of what you need to see in terms of yield of incremental parking spaces to make this project worth doing. And I don't know how to think about that, but there are some that are calling for a pretty big cutback. But at some level, it becomes an uneconomical thing to even do. So I'm trying to figure out where that line is, and I don't know how to think about that. Do you have any color that you would put on that in terms of?
well, the more everybody keeps adding to it, the more the cost goes up and
Yeah.
becomes even more to the point of it may not be cost effective at all to do it.
Mhm.
So if you stop and think about what a few parking spaces are going to bring in, it doesn't bring any more money into the landlord. How are they going to recoup it? It's going to take a while if they get it back in rent. It's a very hard part, and to keep all the businesses there functioning correctly, they need the parking. And actually, the centers become more and more popular. It kind of started when Bucks went in. I love Bucks and I love Jameis, but boy, did he ever promote that place, and it became a success overnight. So that started it. And then when Mark got in there and did the bakery, he also added to it too and promoted himself. And both of those restaurants became very, very popular. So it added a big strain to that parking lot. I had an office there for many years. I know the problems there, all right? And also the people who used to camp there. I used to actually find people showing up with their golf clubs, park their car, get their golf clubs out, hop in another car and go away. Half the time I had to go out and chase them down, and they'd yell at me for I didn't have a right to tell them they couldn't do it. And I says, well, you don't have the right to do this. We used to find people camping in the back lot where everybody's worried about where we're going to put a parking lot. It was overgrown, and there was campsites there. We used to have homeless show up and camp there. So we had to go out there and clean them out all the time. There was issues there all the time. So it's, this is more of a positive, I think. It kind of makes more people aware of what's going on in that area.
Right, okay.
But I can go on forever on history of that parking lot.
Yeah. I'm good for the moment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. Councilmember Brown?
Yeah, I'm curious, Dave, have you guys, thought or analyzed potential impact of more business in the future? Just
More business?
More business because we're growing?
No, you
We're
can't.
adding
There's no
300
way. It's impossible to add more to this place, right? You're constrained by the size of the buildings. You'll be constrained by what you can park. That's it. So unless the town wants to put a parking lot in someplace, I don't see anybody increasing any of the businesses there. Right now, the hardware store has a hard time during lunch hours because the restaurants take up all the parking. They have a hard time with trying to having people come in to purchase things. So it puts a strain on them. The hair salon has the same problem. When they have clients coming in, they have to have them in the morning or in the afternoons because lunchtime, everybody who's coming in for lunch is trying to find places to park. And when you talk about the ratio for parking, today's standards, most people go and meet at a place and have lunch. So when you look at, there's not 2.5 people in a car going to lunch together.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
generally one, which needs one more parking space. So if you look at it, it's really hard. So the hardware store loses parking so the restaurants can survive. It's a give and take in there at all times.
Thank you.
All right. Paul, any questions?
Got a question, it may be for Ms. Prince, is it? I'm sorry, I didn't say your name correctly. In your slide presentation, you mentioned, I think it was on your third or fourth slide, that this is an intent to right-size the parking. This has been an issue for more than 2.5 years. Has your client ever tried to right-size their seating capacities so that they didn't have to right-size the parking?
So,
Or 220% of their current
well, I
their
don't know
CUP.
that we know the exact number. I know that one gentleman shared a number. I don't know what that exact number is. I mean, I do think Christine has made efforts to bring the seating into compliance. I think she's also reached out to the town for help in having that conversation with the tenants. I don't think there's been a blind eye turned by anyone. This has been a much longer than anticipated process. So it is unfortunate that it's taken us 2.5 years to get to this point. Dave and Christine have been working very hard for a long time to try and get this here as soon as possible. That's what I can tell you.
Any more questions, Paul?
That was enough. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll go to our council members on Zoom. Maybe I'll start with Chris.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Wall. Dave, I want to go back to the line of questioning that Councilmember Domkowski was on in terms of some of the citizen amendments that have been put in front of the town council. And one of them from Steve Lubin, recommended or was asking for a sacrifice of 6 spaces to put in tree wells, right? And then to have the lighting put in there at whatever height. I think he was suggesting a lower height, but if they're in the center of the lot, I don't see why they couldn't be 10. And I need to, correct myself from a little bit earlier, because what's in our packet now, the 155 existing number is correct. The 186 includes the 19 spaces for the proposed parklet seating. So I was in error there. We're, still at a deficit. And if the lot went through as you've proposed it, or as the applicants proposed it, we'd have 189 parking spaces in there. If the 6 went away, we'd have 183, which would put us at a 3 parking space deficit, according to the CUP. And if we're right-sizing the parking to try and get into compliance, the proposed plan is plus 3 spots over the required amount. If we remove 6 to do some tree wells and provide some landscaping and a place for you to put in light posts, is that a bridge too far? I mean, it picks up on Councilmember Domkowski's question around the business model side of it. So that was a long-winded question, but are tree wells really off the table?
I would say yes. Primarily as I had a little bit more parking in here than we needed, but when the fire department got through beating the plan up, we lost an additional 10 spots. So they wanted more clearances for their trucks to be able to go around the parking lot. So I felt what we have right now is barely what we need. It should be another 20 spots if we could get them, but there's no way to put them in there. So right now we're trying to comply to what is required by the codes of the Woodside. And, it's the best we can do right now. Taking away more, it was almost to the point of maybe a non-project. So.
Okay.
Chris, you good?
Sorry, yes, thank you.
Ned, any questions from you?
Yeah, I think this is a question for Ms. Prince, the applicant's attorney. One of the things that some of the residents have raised, and it's in our packet, has to do with the easement, the open space easement. And I guess according to the California Government Code, to abandon an open space easement, there needs to be a showing of substantial financial hardship to the landowner. And I guess I'd like you to speak to that standard. I don't want to have, well, maybe we'll have it, but a battle of attorneys and, who's got a better argument here. But it's something that hasn't been raised yet tonight, and I wanted to hear from the applicant, how do they respond to that financial hardship requirement?
So I'm trying to go back. So we definitely submitted in writing a discussion about the financial hardship. I'm trying to scroll through to it. I apologize that I don't remember it all offhand. Yeah, here we go. So Kenyatta Corners, as everybody knows, is uniquely situated in a commercial area of town. The open space lot in the rear really constrains the use. As we've talked about tonight, we are currently underparked for the uses that are permitted. So it is a financial constraint for the owner to maintain, happy tenants, happy customers with the constrained parking. There's no physical space to accommodate that required parking on site unless you abandon a portion of the open space easement. You can't cram 34 new spaces into the existing space. The outdoor parklets, is it a substantial financial hardship to the landowner? Losing those parklets, I think, would be a financial loss to the landowner. I think it would also be a loss to the community. So I think all those things go to the fact that abandonment is necessary to avoid that substantial financial hardship. The center has to provide adequate parking for its businesses. If people can't come and park and go to the hardware store, they're going to stop coming to the hardware store. They're going to go somewhere else. And that's going to, in the long term, pose a financial hardship. Does that help?
Yeah, I guess I'm not trying to lead you anywhere, but the not having the extra 34 spots, does the applicant consider that a constraint or a hardship? Because I feel like constraint and hardship are two different things.
Well,
Hardship I read as, you're about to lose a piece of property unless you get some kind of change or something like that. So I guess, is this a constraint or a hardship in the mind of the applicant?
I might beg to differ on semantics. I think constraints lead to hardships, right? I mean, if you are constrained, it's a matter of time. I think it would be, and Christine could come up and talk to it better than I could. It is a financial hardship to be underparked.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
All right, thanks, Ned. So I have a few questions. I probably start off with the first one, which is, what alternatives to asphalt were considered for the back lot, if any?
Well, okay. Part of the plans calls for concrete in a lot of places. So we're having to put concrete across the whole front of the restaurants to make handicap accessible, correct, so on and so forth. We also have a permeable asphalt that's in the back as well for drainage. But that's about it.
So did you ever consider anything other than permeable asphalt in the back?
No, I was working with a civil engineer on this, and his suggestion primarily was for asphalt on it.
Okay, and in your professional opinion, are there any alternatives to permeable asphalt?
Oh, but the cost of things, to make it look prettier, and make it
What
look
would be
nicer.
some of those alternatives, putting cost aside?
Oh, you could put down pavers, you can, I could go on for hours about different things. You can do grasscrete, you can do, but every part of this has to be able to hold up a fire truck. So I'm restrained with what vehicles can go in there. So it wipes out preset pavers. unless they're sitting on top of concrete. So that they can hold up a fire truck. And the fire truck, their standards are very high, all right? I just got through doing a driveway that they'll never drive on, but I had to build it to their specs. And it drove the price up of over $500,000.
But theoretically, you could do grass or,
Couldn't do the grass because it gets wet, gets soft, fire trucks get stuck. And they sink into the mud.
yeah.
So,
And then I'm curious, like, as this process kind of got going, you were putting plans together, what, if any, neighbor outreach did you do?
say that again.
As you were putting these plans together, was there any outreach to the neighbors?
No, just the one, Dick DeLuna is a friend of mine. He talked to me all the time. And he's on the north end of the parking lot.
Okay, so there was outreach to one neighbor, but no outreach to other neighbors?
I redid the house at 3100. I added a couple of buildings to 3100 Woodside Road, which is directly next to him. I've worked on that property for the last 40 years. That property, we planted, I did a lot of screen planting inside there using the typical plants, all right? Mr. Brian Dabowski would like to use, which I don't mind at all because it's a great screening tree, all right? And brush is the Laurus nobilis, works great. That neighbor seems to be, they don't like the noise at times, but most of it, the lighting really didn't bother them. When it did bother them, I figured out what the problem was and fixed it.
Okay.
So.
And then my last question, probably not a question for you, maybe a question for Ms. Prince or maybe just the property owner. I'm curious if you're able to share any details around how the success of the financial success of your tenants or the not success benefits you as the landlord.
It really doesn't. So they have set leases, and most of them, last 10 years or more, and I can't change them. I don't do it on sales, or anything like that. So it's kind of set.
Okay, so for example, the more money that the bakery makes, that doesn't filter down to you.
No.
And that remains true for all of your tenants.
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions. Anybody else?
I guess Chris did.
All right, I don't see any hands up. I would propose a quick bio break before we go into the public comment period. We will reconvene at 10:15.
Great.
So meeting back to order. If everybody could please conclude their sidebar conversations and take your seats. All right, we are gonna open the public comment period as soon as my fellow council members take their seats. All right. I already see a number of people lining up in the room, and I already have a number of hands up in the Zoom room. So we're going to do a back and forth, or I'll take a public comment in the room, and then I'll go to the Zoom room just so everybody knows how I'm going to do this. And we will start in the room. A reminder to everyone to let's keep it respectful. We've done a really good job so far. Let's keep it that way. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Like I said at the beginning of the meeting, if you want more time, you can get back in line after everybody else has had an opportunity. And please introduce yourself so that we know who you are. And that's it. Please go ahead.
Hi, and thank you for all the time and effort everyone's putting in here. I'm asking a special request.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Rob Solomon. I live at 1450 Kenyatta Road, but my neighbor at 1470, Dick DeLuna, asked me to read a letter. He's 86, he broke his pelvis, and he can't be here. So I asked special permission to read his letter. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Dear members of the Woodside Town Council, we purchased our property at 1470 Kenyatta Road in 1994. At the time, I visited the town hall to inquire about the open space between our property and the Four Corners area. I was told it was designated as open space and would remain so indefinitely. I also spoke with George Roberts, who reassured me that the open space would be preserved as long as we were alive. I am now 86 years old, and that open space will be gone. I understand the consequences of passing of Proposition A, but I never expected to see such a large-scale proposal as what is being presented to us now. We are losing 10 to 12 parking spaces and gaining 40 to 69 new ones. From my perspective, this will likely require a large retaining wall near my fence. If you look uphill from the current parking lot, the grading would probably result in a wall about 20 feet tall, topped with a security fence to prevent accidents. This is no small project. It would transform a beautiful walkable area into a concrete and blacktop jungle. Our family enjoys outdoor dining, but the overextension of this project is concerning. The bakery already has permits for its indoor space and back patio, and adding 70+ seats in front would turn it into a much larger operation. That's from Dick. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. All right, I'm gonna go to iPhone 166 in the Zoom room. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, please.
Yes, this is Mickey Marca, the other neighbor on 155 Prospect Street. Thank you. And a couple of clarifying comments that we heard today. The main reason why right now, as the applicant was suggesting that there's no parking space for hardware stores or the hair salon during the day is because the restaurants are not complying with the city enforcement, with the CUPs. If the CUPs were in place, we wouldn't have this issue, because the number on the table that you were showing before that had the number of seats, the number of parking spots for the number of seats, the actual number that is needed is to be fully on code is less than 165. You're at 155, so you're 11 or 12 seats of difference. So I think the issue here is the lack of enforcement is distorting the complete scale of the project. And when you are adding parklets, which we're all supportive of, and you lose 8 parking spaces, there's no reason to move 69 to the back. So the lack of complying is what not allowing this to happen. And from all the committees that we've attended as the enforced neighbor, I want to clarify also something. Dick DeLuna could not be there, as Rob just mentioned, but Dick DeLuna has not been approached by the applicant either. I hope he's on the line and he can clarify, but I spoke to him and we are aligned on this. He has never heard from the applicant all on this process, also on the details of the plan. The third thing is, how do we compensate a applicant who has not kept regulation? There's no respect for fire truck lanes. There's no respect for picking up trash, cleaning the creek. There's no respect for lights. We've asked multiple times to fix the lights, and all they did was put a cardboard on top to make the light not be bright in a place where it shouldn't be. And everything that we've heard from every single committee so far has been recommendations of the committees that you guys, I know you're listening to, have recommended changes to the light. And every single time the answer is, we can. Why? Because they're maximizing spaces. It's all about maximizing. There's no reason why we need to add 44 outdoor dining versus 34 versus 24. There's no reason why we couldn't let people, the restaurants, manage their 95 seating or 120 any way the weather permits, because a quarter of the year people will not sit outside for weather. So I'm glad to see a lot of the questions that you guys are asking today. We're hopeful that we can find a solution, but make no mistake, the reason why this is parking doesn't work and this project is overscale is because of not complying with rules.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to the next public comment in the room.
Good evening. My name is Rick Van Duzer. I'm a lawyer at Farella, Brown & Martell, and I represent Mickey Malka and Becky Kleiner. I want to address just a couple of things. I know I have only 3 minutes, so I want to get to the point quickly. I want to talk first of all about abandonment. The first point I would like to make here is that it's not the applicant who has to abandon this easement. It's the town. It's the town council that needs to make the findings necessary to abandon the easement. It's the town who ultimately will be legally responsible if they don't make the right decision. And so instead of simply relying upon what the applicant has said, I would strongly suggest that the town council consult with the town's attorney and ask that town's attorney for her opinion about whether or not those findings can be made here. We can argue about whether or not abandonment is inconsistent with the general plan or consistent with the general plan. We can argue about whether or not it serves some public purpose at this point or not. What we can't argue about is what the factors are in the law and what you need to find in order to be able to abandon that easement. And if you can't abandon the easement, none of this parking can be built. Mr. Commissioner Fluid raised the issue with respect to the last element, and I want to focus on that one just for a second. The law says that the applicant, or in this case, the county, has to make a finding that abandonment is necessary to avoid substantial financial hardship on the landowner. And that substantial financial hardship can't be caused by the landowner. It has to be involuntary. In this case, what we just heard from the applicant's lawyer is that it's the open space easement that's resulting in this problem. Well, the open space easement was agreed to by the owner of the property, the applicant. It was agreed to in 1980. It was agreed to be in perpetuity. And now they want you to abandon it to allow for 69 parking spaces to be crammed into the back end of this open space easement. They are not suffering any current financial hardship. They aren't showing you and haven't shown you that they will continue or will eventually suffer any financial hardship if this proposal is not approved. So I would submit that this council simply cannot. It does not have any evidence on which to base that finding. And if it doesn't have any evidence on which to base that finding, there is no way a vote to abandon this open space easement will survive legal challenge. Secondly, what I heard here today was essentially that no one really knows how much parking really is needed at Kenyatta Quarters. We have a zoning code that drives parking requirements that, as Commissioner Domkowski pointed out, make no sense. For Emily Joubert, for the hardware store, even the salon at 10 parking spots. They have 2 stylists. Why do they need 10 parking spots? We also don't know what a compliant usage of the restaurants would result in traffic and parking needs, because the Village Bakery is not and has not for years complied with those requirements. Until you know that, you have no idea whether you need more parking or not. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to Kendra Stewart in the Zoom room.
Yes, hi, hello. I really want to urge the council to approve the plan for additional parking at Kenyatta Quarters. You know, I voted in favor of Measure A, as did majority of the Woodside residents. And now that Measure A won, I think it's really time for the council to move forward with next steps. You know, I really agree with Councilmember Dombrowski, you know, and also looking over the materials for tonight's hearing, I see that the parking ratio plan, you know, that plan doesn't really make any sense based on the use of the shopping center, and it seems pretty antiquated. You know, to me, it seems like the parking spaces should be allocated in such a way that they support the needs of the small businesses in the center. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if the hardware store needs 36 parking spaces. I love and shop at the hardware store frequently, and I see the store traffic, and I would really question the need for that allocation, which subsequently means that, you know, the outdoor dining areas for the restaurants are really getting squeezed down again, you know, because this plan, you know, more spaces have been allocated in that antiquated way. So I really want to encourage the town to revisit and modernize the methodology about how the spaces are allocated to better align and really support the businesses in the corner and that Measure A that we passed to allow for the outdoor dining. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kendra. All right, going back into the room, Mr. Pugh.
Hi, Don Pugh. I've been a 50-year resident of Woodside. This project violates everything that Woodside stands for. And let's admit, it's not really about outdoor dining. It's about a project to expand the bakery by 47 seats and 22 seats at Bucks. It's a restaurant expansion project that needs a whole bunch of parking to achieve. For 2 years, I have been complaining the bakery's been violating the limits, and we've already talked about they have caused the problems. So let's not dwell on the height of light poles or the size of plants or trail light. Let's focus on what's really important. And that is the fact that bulldozing the open space is totally wrong. The findings are totally silly, frankly, the ones that staff did. You cannot certify those findings. And I think, Gene, your description of rationalizations in the findings is an excellent description. Particularly, the general plans requires business in town to service day-to-day needs by local residents, but a recent survey revealed that only 5% of the restaurant patrons were residents. Expanding a local tourist attraction is a violation of the general plan. We talked about financial hardship, Ned. That was a good question. The only financial hardship will be the fact that the bakery can no longer make their money from all their illegal seats that they've had. They agreed in 2016 that the parking limits and the seating limits in the CUP could make them a fine financial return. So for them to start whining about not making enough money, it's because what they've been doing is wrong. This would detract from the community well-being, bulldozing a beautiful oak forest and ruin the trails for an ugly parking lot. For the variance, it's a grant of special privileges. Should we bulldoze the open space, just allow the bakery to expand? This hardship was created by the bakery and others which exceeded the seating limits. This is detrimental to public welfare and other property. Bulldozing the open space will be 9 months construction, 1,500 yards of dirt, 400 trucks, 10 to 12-foot retaining wall topped by giant steel fences, just like an elephant enclosure. I think it would be fine for if we had elephants in Woodside. So why is the town staff and council taking a pro-development stance and supporting the project that's so wrong for Woodside? Do you want commercial interests to eat away at a rural environment? So please vote against this outrageous proposal. So I propose a solution. One is put this project on hold until a whole bunch of these questions have been answered and the town center plan, which has recently gone out to RFP, can include all the parking needs for the whole town. And secondly, start enforcing the seating limits immediately. Complying with seating limits would eliminate many of the parking problems that we're having, which are caused by the congestion of it. If the town approves the bulldozing of the open space, it will be sued and you will lose big time. So it's time that you start acting in accordance with the law. I've asked, my concern is that this decision where the council told staff do not enforce the seating limits was made without any public discussion. That's a violation of the Brown Act. I've asked the district attorney to investigate that because that was wrong. Never once did the council discuss, should we ignore the seating limits? And you have even asked them, don't do any counts. Well, we don't, how come he hasn't counted the number of seats? This is ridiculous. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. All right, we're going to go to Maggie Ma in the Zoom room.
Okay. Yes, hi, can you hear me now?
Yes,
No?
we can hear you.
Oh, great, thank you. I'm here to speak about the issue of the trail. I strongly disagree with the staff recommendations to allow the applicant to, first of all, to allow the trail to be a multi-use trail, and for the applicant to put it where they want to put it, actually. So, and my reasons are this, that I'm assuming that this project will be approved ultimately and go forward. And as a member of the Trails Committee for over 20 years, I strongly disagree with the staff recommendations. So, and my reasons are this, that you can call something a multi-use trail, but that doesn't provide for the safety of the multi-use trail users. And I'm going to quote from the California State Parks Trails Handbook, which says that to be considered a multi-use trail, first it must be designated for cyclists, equestrians, and pedestrians. But here's where things get important. Trails that allow cyclists and pedestrians and equestrians are not considered multi-use. Just in other words, you cannot simply change the easement dedication and expect it to work. In the absence of a properly designed multi-use trail, what you're going to get is an unsafe situation for all user groups. We see this all the time on the trails within the public right of way. And also, I have to disagree with staff. There are multiple conflicts all over the place. And so here is actually an opportunity to design a functioning multi-use trail that would be properly designed and ensure the safety of all trail users. And this is not something that can be left to, it's not a casual thing. You don't just rename something a multi-use trail and have it happen. What happens on the trails in the public right of way now are perfect examples because there's constant conflict. So it needs to be properly designed, and it also needs to be designed with multiple user input right from the get-go. So I would encourage however this project falls out, that the trail, however it, whatever happens here, that if it's a multi-use trail, that it be properly designed and it include the input from all trail users right from the get-go to avoid potential conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Mr. Sullivan, are you going again? I know you spoke on behalf of your neighbor. Are you now wanting to speak on behalf of yourself?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think that Whoa video at the beginning of this meeting was amazing. And I think that plus common sense kind of sums it all up. If we are, to be honest, given the ambiguity, the opacity, and the language of Measure A, it totally seems incumbent upon the Honorable Planning Commission and the Town Council to provide some kind of clarity and the common sense that's required to do this. The applicant's proposal is really aggressive, and it doesn't seem to factor in the thoughtfulness of the general plan and just the general nature of Woodside. When voting on Measure A, I don't think anyone knew they approved a death sentence for the open space easement. I don't think they approved expanding pavement to get coverage to 105,000 square feet, and I wonder if it's even more than that, given some of the descriptions tonight. It's a 60% increase in pavement in what becomes a concrete jungle at the end of the day. I don't think people knew they were approving grading exceptions. There's gonna be a lot of grading, and I don't think anyone knew that. I don't think anyone knew the permanent parklets only allowed for 20-something diners. So if you think about this, get this. The outdoor dining is wonderful. We all want it. This plan calls for these parklets to shrink the seating, which is about 50, 60-ish now, to 20-something. It flies in the face of what everyone wants in Measure A, supposedly. They want outdoor dining, and this plan calls for a 60-ish% reduction in outdoor seating. It doesn't make any sense. The numbers don't add up. It's crazy. And I don't think they knew the scenic corridor was going to be significantly impacted. I'm not sure what this retaining wall and this, we should know what it looks like before you guys approve. And I'm not sure that we're solving for anything other than the fact that the Village Bakery has 200-ish seats when it's supposed to have 100 something. So the way the parking count is nonsensical. I love Emily Joubert. I love the hardware store. My kids get their haircut at the salon, but I've never seen more than 7 or 8 people in Emily Joubert at one time. I've never seen 7 or 8 or 9 people, more than 9 people in the hardware store. So there's just a lot of bad numbers here, and that has to be taken into account. And then one of the key elements of Measure A is play structures. Where the heck are the play structures? So I see a lot of pavement. I see a lot of destruction. I see no play structures. And I see shrunken parklets that account for 22 seats. It doesn't make any sense. So I think we want outdoor dining. We probably want a little bit more parking, but this aggressive plan shouldn't be approved by the Planning Commission. They screwed up on their job. And as the Town Council, I think it's incumbent upon you to protect the citizens of Woodside who voted for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. All right, I'm going to go to the Zoom room. Peter Bailey, you're up next.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. First of all, I just want to say thanks to the Town Council and all the committees. You are all volunteers and really appreciate all you're doing, all the countless hours. So thank you so much. I was a co-sponsor of Measure A, which began as a means to make permanent the outdoor dining experience that we've all enjoyed during COVID and brought our community together. And I think it's become a community asset. And so that was kind of how this started, right? And to make that happen, we needed more parking. And I think sitting here today, we absolutely need more parking in Woodside. The spillover on Kenyatta is insane as a safety issue itself. And so I urge the council to look at this plan as a way to solve that. And if not this plan, what plan? Like, what is the plan to solve that? And at all costs to protect, I think, the outdoor dining we have come to know and love as a community asset, at Woodside. And I guess I also want to say, because no one else has said it, I wanted to say thanks to Christine Roberts, who as a property owner is signing up to investing a lot of money to expand parking that is very much needed. I don't think she's going to get a big check back from increased rent anytime soon. And one of my fears is that we put so many requirements on this thing that she simply walks away. And that would be a real shame. And I just, want to encourage us to try to have a reasonable approach here, because we do have a density and parking problem. We do want to keep these community resources like outdoor dining, and we have a property owner willing to make investments. And so we got to find a way to make that work, in my mind. So we had a vote on this. It passed. It was not a specific plan to do a specific thing. It was to try to, obviously rezone the property and embrace outdoor dining and approve some additional parking. And so I would urge the council to pursue that. And if not this plan, to work reasonably with the property owner to get something that's going to make sense. So beyond that, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete. All right, next up in the room.
Hi, again, it's Elena Van Voort Wagner. A lot of you know me as having a nonprofit here in Woodside that does data science for environment and climate. And I'm going to just hit on two low-hanging fruit here things, because you guys have done an awesome job. Thank you very much for everything all the questions you guys brought up. You're obviously very well educated about all of this. It's just been an amazing event. My first off is going to be dedicated to Lee. Kristen, this entire community, you can see everybody here. We're a community.
Elena, can you direct your comments to the council,
We're
please?
a community. We're an educated community. And when I was sitting here next to the lawyer of Kristen, I was very disappointed, because I saw the two of them do a Google search on exactly what is the standardized lighting needed for a parking lot. And they went to the AI, analyzed 15 to 20 feet, stood up in front of you as if they've done research, and said the average that we're looking at doing is 15 feet. And they presented that to you as if they've done research. And I think that this entire proposal has actually been put together with that amount of research. And unfortunately, I believe Kristen deserves better. We all deserve better. And I think this has brought the community together in a wonderful way to be able to present that. And I hope that moving forward, we can have much higher expectations of research for all the questions that we do have, such as lighting. My second one, I want to be able to hit on, we started off right away with fencing and environment. And I know that this was brought to the environmental committee a while ago. If this continues, I would really like to see the environment committee be able to put together a list for you guys for very complacent riparian native plants that can be very helpful, very beneficial. I heard right off the back that nobody commented on 2 pear trees. I mean, that clearly we don't know whoever suggested that, the history of rats in the area, particularly behind Roberts. We really shouldn't put in pear trees. They have an extensive amount of water usage. We would be looking at more native trees like madrones. And I hope that I can be helpful in being able to produce some of that realistic planting that we should be able to do. And we go to our community committees for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. All right, Andrew Green in the Zoom room.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Thank you for including me in your call and conference today. I wanted to thank the council and Christine Roberts for putting this proposal together. I'll try and keep things really quick. I really want to reinforce Mr. Dombrowski's suggestion to analyze the parking standards. It seems that things are a little out of balance. I would also add that I think it's really sort of poor form to vilify an individual business when I think that this is a collective matter where business and population has grown in Woodside, and the demands of changing work habits and lifestyles are having an impact on things, not one poor performing business. So thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. All right, we'll take the next comment in the room.
Hi, Kim Hansen. I was thrilled and shocked that someone finally read Measure A. I'm on 2 committees, volunteer committees, Circulation Committee, Trail Committee, in the Planning Commission. All of these volunteer bodies, Measure A was not even read. And I feel like this process and this plan has got to take a step back, because we've had very well-intended people that are trying to interpret a measure that was not even read or presented in these packets. I also wanted to acknowledge that I think the citizens here and town council have done an unbelievable job asking good questions and bringing up good points. And so that's been fantastic. A couple points. The Maggie Ma, I agree with her that if you do approve this project, a trail that includes equestrians and strollers and mothers and fathers and kids and e-bikes, we have to have some restrictions and some modifications to that. One point I'd really like to make sure is brought home is, why have we not enforced the CUP? Why have we, sitting here as a body, why do we have different numbers for how many parking spots, for how many seats at the restaurants? I would like a good explanation. I went out and counted parking spots the other day. I counted 160 cars. So that's my question. And with no enforcement process, and maybe no will to enforce the CUP for Kenyatta Corners, this is a problem. I called planning and building and public works, and the last recorded complaint from building department was in 2017. It was still open in 2019. This problem is, for some unexplained reason to me, it's been open for that long. 2019, it was still open. COVID hits. The town actively decides not to enforce the CUP until COVID restrictions are over. Guess what? COVID is over. And the response was a task force by town council, and there are still complaints about this. I've also requested, maybe I've missed some information, maybe the part-time code enforcement officer that we have who works 2 half days a week, I think we can do better. If we don't currently have budget for this, then we should look at it and budget for paying attention. And I don't think adding more seats to a non-compliant CUP, even if we add parking, will solve the problem. How many parking tickets were written in Woodside last month? 1. That also talks to compliance. If you think having the sheriff patrol this area, it will help with safety, I don't think it will. And there's an assertion that Woodside's population has grown over 45 years, and that's not at all accurate.
Kim, I'm gonna have to pause you, but you can absolutely have another crack at it at the end.
Thank you.
All right. I think next up in the Zoom room is Kristen New.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this. Commenters keep referring back to the fact that Measure A being passed is evidence that most of Woodside allegedly agrees with installing a parking lot. I will say I am one voter experiencing ballot regret. I feel duped by Measure A. My understanding was creating a public space like an amphitheater. That was how it was touted. I envisioned something closer to Portola Valley Town Center, a central community gathering place, something that actually is sorely lacking in Woodside, in my opinion, something that is a green outdoor gathering space. So paving Paradise and putting up a parking lot was not the touted promise. And as noted during council discussions, nowhere in Measure A was it noted in the language that the parcel had been set aside as green space in perpetuity. The congestion is a problem, but surely there are other solutions. Why not think outside the box? Not even really radical ideas for reducing congestion, for freeing up parking. Enforce the 1-hour parking signs for a start. The enforcement is quite poor. Also, maybe think of using a shuttle. Like, couldn't the town do something with shuttles? There are other towns that have, shuttle systems. It could be an electric bicycle tuk-tuk, if you're going for the green, type of thing, or as a nod to equestrian heritage, maybe horse-drawn carriages, but something that could shuttle people along Woodside Road from other areas, perhaps even utilizing, other parking areas and having that shuttle, if people can park elsewhere and sort of be shuttled down to downtown or through the town, perhaps that would help with congestion. I think there are better ways to approach this. There are more alternate ideas than just, quite frankly, going about it the lazy way and saying, we need more parking, better pave it over. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, we will go to the next comment in the room. Mr. Lubin.
Steve Lubin. I have some sympathy with the idea that maybe the parklets are getting shrunk too much. I think they've been a wonderful addition to the humanity of town center. Not so much the patio out back of the bakery, but the parklets have been a great meeting and gathering spot. And I think that's a great start for fixing our town center. I don't see how you're going to make the findings to abandon the open space. I made the motion at the planning commission when that open space was required, and we definitely understood that meant in perpetuity. But presuming you're going to find a way to do that, I think we shouldn't start with expanding the restaurant uses and making the parking fit. I think we should design the parking lot to, town standards. And I don't think, the current, you've seen my drawings, and I think we need more room along the creek to make enough screening there. I think a fence right next to the parking lot, a wall-to-wall parking lot with a fence right next to it is perfectly awful and isn't going to survive. So I think it needs to be planting, and I think we need that extra 10 feet that you'd get by parallel parking for that planting. And I think you need landscape islands in order to put low lights in like we have here in town center. And I think, the three landscape islands would give enough, space them close enough so they could do an adequate job of lighting. The path, I think, there's talk about it being 6%. I think the issue is the maximum percent. I think we should look at ADA standards for this path if it's going to be a publicly owned path, which is around a maximum of 8%, 1 in 12, and it requires, level spaces every so often. I think the path should be designed to that standard, and it should be at least 8 feet wide for multi-use so that people can safely pass each other. And that has to be, needs a detailed design. And then one last issue is the path in front. This I didn't mention in my letter. The path in front has a sharp right angle turn just before crossing and offsets to the crosswalk. I'm not familiar with all the complications there, but that's something that kids on bikes are going to end up veering out into the road like they do when they cross at the crosswalk there and end up going on the outside of the guardrail instead of the inside of the guardrail. There has to be, a clear, straightish path for kids to actually use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. All right, going to Cindy in the Zoom room.
Hi, this is Cindy's husband, Evan Goldberg. She and I are 26-year Woodside residents. The issue of additional parking has already been adjudicated at length, and there was a vote. Additional parking and preserving the outside dining won. This is actually a relatively rare situation where the people's will is completely clear. The responsibility of the town government is now to carry it out. What we don't need is another attempt to overturn the results of an election. In terms of the actual parking allocation, it's long past time to rationalize how it's done, as Councilman Domkowski has suggested. Let's be real. We, the residents of Woodside, are very heavy users of these restaurants. We see our neighbors there all the time because we all really like these restaurants, and we're the ones that pay the biggest price for the lack of parking. Let's fix the archaic allocation rules to follow what the other towns on the peninsula are doing and allow residents to enjoy these restaurants and actually be able to find parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. All right, next up in the room, I am going to ask if there's anybody that hasn't gone yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, council members, for your time. I know that it's we're now entering hour 11 as what my internal clock says of this.
Absolutely perfect.
But a lot of people have spoken on.
Oh, sorry. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jason Applebaum. I've been here for going on 3 years now, and a lot of people going back and forth. Tyler McNiven was here earlier today. I'm not sure if he's in the room or he's fallen asleep at this point. But the Zoom room, I mean, he left for something he had to do. As a longtime patron of Bucks before living here and now living here, I've had the pleasure to meet all of my neighbors, hanging out at what is one of the best places to live and the place that I enjoy calling home. And I think that parking has become a pretty large safety issue. And when people talk about community gathering, it's pretty hard to gather at a place that you realistically can't get to. Measure A passed. There's lots of confusion around that, but it did pass. It is the will of the people. And I'd really hate to see outdoor dining go away. And I'd really like to see this measure through. Thank you very much.
All right, Vicky Ko, you're up next in the Zoom room.
You're up.
Vicky,
Okay.
you're on mute, but it looks like now you're off mute. All right, Vicky, we'll come back to you. Mark's iPad is up next in the Zoom room.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, Mark Dickey here. I simply want to echo the comments of the number of individuals who have talked about the conditional use permits. I think that's the core of the issue here. There's a balance between the interest of the citizens, of which we all are citizens here, and those of the commercial interests. And it seems to me if we're going to have things like conditional use permits, they need to be enforced. If we allow people to go, or businesses to go ahead and abuse those privileges, what's to keep the other enterprises from increasing the density of their businesses and therefore putting more demands on the parking requirements to run the business? It seems to me that part of the purpose here of the council and the various boards of which you all mightily serve, and thank you for all of that, is to go ahead and keep that balanced interest between that of the citizenry and those of the businesses. And that's through the use of conditional use permit. If we aren't going to enforce them, then we should just disband and allow entities to go ahead and do what they will. I know that all of us, if we intend to put in garden lighting, if we intend to put up a fence, if we intend to do anything on our property, it requires compliance with various codes so that the rural nature of Woodside can be retained. And so I would simply say that let's go back to the basics. Let's make sure that the rules are being followed. And if they are being followed and parking is needed, then so be it. But if they aren't being followed, then let's go ahead and enforce it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. All right, Mr. B, before you go, I just want to make sure, is there anybody else in the room who hasn't had an opportunity to make public comment? Leanne, would you like to go next?
Hi, I just want to share that Bill and I own a large restaurant in Lake County. And it's pretty huge, but anyway, we have a huge parking lot as well. So we're lucky there. People come up and they park, and then they eat out on our really large patio, which is at least this size, half, 3/4 of this room. So that's a luxury that we have with that building. What we have here is outdoor outdoor eating in a driveway. I think that just kind of makes me sick. I know everybody likes to eat outdoors, and I like the community part of it. You know, my good friend over here on the council, to a couple of them, all of them, they love doing that. And most of the people in the town, we're very blessed that we all like each other that much that we want to eat with each other. But it's just not set up for that size that they're going for here. And to do all this and to take away the walking for the kids and all the things we had back there, it just isn't right. So somebody's got to give something. You can't just say, oh, I got to pile as many people in here as possible. I guess, you know, we have 400 there, but maybe we'll have 800, you know, just because we want the money. But it shouldn't always be about money, which I know is kind of a dumb thing to say if you like money. But anyway, so I just don't think it's the right place. But you could put, you know, round tables where groups of 6 could sit and enjoy outdoor eating. That there's nothing wrong with that. But the way it is now, it's so congested. I've never even thought of even going over there, even when I see my friends there, because it just doesn't look good. I don't know, but maybe, you know, Dick has fun over there, so who knows? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anybody else in the room who, actually, Thalia, apologize. I'm going to go to the next person in the Zoom room, which is Tyler with an exclamation point.
Oh, wow, an exclamation point. That's exciting. Didn't realize I had that there. Well, hey, I just want to, say thank you to the council and to our neighbors and to all our guests that dine with us. And thank you to Christine Roberts for, trying to do what she believes is truly good for the community and carry on the legacy of her family. I believe that everyone here has what is best for the community in mind. So I just want to reemphasize my commitment that if the parking lot in any form is approved, my family and I will continue to ensure all the rules and standards of the parking lot are upkept and listen to the concerns of the neighbors in the community. And if or when we make mistakes, we're open to hearing them so we can correct. My email is tyler@buckswoodside.com, and I'm here as a servant to you, the community. Apologies, I'm just got on a red-eye flight, so there's a little bit of gotta turn my phone off, but I just want to say best of luck to the council for making your decision, and feel free to come and find me at Bucks and chat about this more. And I love you all very, very much.
Thank you, Tyler. We love you too, and please safe travels.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody want to follow that? Thalia.
Thalia Lubin. So this kind of feels like Cinderella's shoe. It's not fitting. And that tells me as an architect that this needs to go back to the drawing board. I know that we have an election come up, council changes, but you can call a special meeting. People make applications and sometimes they get approved, sometimes they get denied. Sometimes they get sent back for revisions. I'm not opposed to this project in theory. I'm opposed to this particular plan. And it seems to me that it still needs a lot more work, and it should be taken in context with the town center plan. Every advisory body that's reviewed this has struggled with it. The ASRB struggled, and I'm not sure they are the Architecture Site Review Board. A lot of discussion about trails, not that much discussion about the design of the site. The Planning Commission, they were struggling. They talked about continuing it, and they asked the question, and they were told, well, it's already on the town agenda for the council meeting. Items come on and off the agenda for various reasons. You can continue this. I'm not sure why the rush. I'm opposed to the timing and lack of input. It just seems to me that we can do better. This is a major change in the town center. Some of the council members are stepping off. This is going to be your legacy, and we're going to have to live with it for a long time. And yes, it is private property. And yes, we do appreciate that the Roberts family is supplying quite a bit of retail business in town, which is great. I support the businesses. What if it all turns to offices tomorrow? Then we'll have a sea of parking that we don't need. I think we need to reconsider this. This is the heart of our community, and I think it deserves to have a really good plan. This isn't it. And I would hope that we could take a step back, look at a master plan, talk about, I know Christine has said it's taken her a long time to get here, but it's only been a few months of review. So I'm asking, please, let's do the right thing. I know we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Thalia. All right, the last hand up in the Zoom room is David Middleman.
Good evening, David Middleman, 280 Grandview, speaking as a private citizen. I wanted to speak to two issues I have with the Kenyatta Corners project as proposed. Firstly, I also feel a little deceived. The text of Measure A read in part, first, Measure A would allow improvement of residentially zoned properties in town center with a public amphitheater, gazebo, or similar building designed to provide a gathering place for community events, promoting art and culture. My concern stems from a perceived discrepancy between the proposed project and the initial promise. As the 4 votes of our household understood it, and the measure passed by 4 votes, we thought we were voting to allow the construction of a public gathering place, which would naturally require parking to accommodate visitors. However, the town is now considering vacating an open space easement for the sole purpose of creating more parking. This is not what the 4 of us voted for. Secondly, the argument for more parking needs to be revised. The property's conditional use permit was violated when the traffic study, starting on page 374, was conducted in October 2022. And the Woodside Bakery likely had the same number of seats as it does today, twice what is specified in the CUP, nearly 200 seats. So of course, there's a parking problem. You have seats for 3 restaurants, not 2. I am not here to argue that Roberts should not expand the parking area. However, your decision should be based on factual information. The proposed parking would not solve the alleged problem. That's because the parking is planned for only a fraction of the current seat count. It's based on the legally allowed seat. The parking is, sorry, it's late. It is crucial that we have accurate data to make informed decisions. Until the CUP is enforced and a traffic study is conducted under those conditions, we do not have the necessary information to determine the amount of parking required. Furthermore, if we are to vacate the open space easement, we should receive the promised public gathering space spoken of in Measure A. If vacating the open space easement really is the will of the people, maybe we should have another vote voter measure to ask that question. Thank you.
Thank you, David. All right, I'm gonna take the final public comment in the Zoom room. And then before we do repeat appearances in this room, I do want to maybe pause and have a quick discussion with the council, if that's okay. So Vicky, you are up in the Zoom room. And we still can't hear you. All right, Vicky, I think you're experiencing maybe some audio issues. All right, so looking around to my fellow council members, it is getting late. It's 20 to 11 p.m. I'm starting to wonder, or have been wondering actually, whether or not it's going to be possible to get through this item this evening. So I wanted to kind of look around the room and take the temperature of whether or not we're at a point where we should consider continuing the item, and whether or not there are topics for which the council needs more information. And Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, but procedurally, to continue the meeting, is it that we are required to have a need for more information, or can we continue it based on the time? Help me understand the basis upon which we could continue if that's what the council wanted to do.
You can continue if you've run out of steam in discussing the item. It would probably be helpful for the applicant if there are specific things that you know that you already need more information on, to give the applicant that notice this evening, so that when they come back, they can respond to those requests.
Okay, thank you for that. So I definitely, if we were to continue, there would be another opportunity to make public comments. So I want to pause the public comment period just for a moment, and kind of look around the room and count noses. Is there appetite to continue this item? And if there is, are there things on which you are hoping to get more information?
So there is appetite for me to continue. My issue is I'm unavailable next Tuesday night, so I don't want to not be a part of the decision making. So I guess that's the question. This has to happen on Tuesday nights. No, we could do we could do Thursday. We could do whatever, as long as we do something before the election where we are no longer allowed to convene. Correct?
Yeah, your last meeting has to be before the election. Your code requires that you have no meetings until the election results are certified. So that really means that the month of November is dark, basically.
Mhm.
So that would mean if you do not do something before the election, then this would be continued until December.
Okay. So I'm good Monday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. I don't know if I'm in a position to say what it is that we need to, I think in the big picture, not to be granular about lights and fences and all those things are important that people heard, but I'm in Councilmember Brown's thought process around wanting some tree wells incorporated just in a big picture design point of view. And my only other issue is just mitigating impacts to the western neighbor. You know, if we're going to have a 6-foot wall and we're going to have real foliage to screen, that's one thing. If we're not, then, you know, to mitigate that exposure, I would be interested in a parallel parking situation there. Now, the problem with that is it cuts 9 spots out. So I get it. That might not be feasible. So I'm hoping the screening option is something that can just muscle up a little bit. But the big issue is I don't want an asphalt slab without any design element to it. I mean, I hate to sound like I'm on the ASRB. I didn't sign up for this. I thought this would be cleared by the time it got to us, but here we are. But yeah, so that's the only thing I can say right now without reviewing what is probably 4 pages of notes at this point. So I'm not going to be able to dice it any clearer than that.
Councilmember Brown?
I need more information specifically about what's the real demand for seating for parking. I just don't think I've got that from the data we've got. And I'd like to take this time to try to dig something out, whatever we can, to document what is really needed before we step forward and try to make a big decision.
All right, looking to our council members on the Zoom room. Anybody
Yep.
share their thoughts?
I'll go, Jen, or Mayor Wall, sorry. I'm good any day next week. I agree, I know we're not deliberating, but my penchant is to agree with Councilmember Brown and Domkowski on adding some foliage. I also agree that significant a fence along the western edge sounds great. The other thing that I'd like to take that time to explore is definitive enforcement mechanisms, because I know the ones at our disposal aren't great, but I will take that on in conjunction either with somebody on council or somebody on staff. But yeah, next week is great for me.
Ned?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of continuing. I think the only new information or additional information I would need is what, it sounds like there has not been much of an attempt to enforce parking. So what does that look like? If you were to do that, I don't think that information can come out between now and say Monday, but I don't have much other information I need from the applicant other than I think it just to be fair to the applicant and the residents that this should be moved to next week. So we're not here at midnight trying to carve this thing up. Next week, I have a standing commitment on Wednesday evening. Thursday is Halloween, which at least I think it is, which I am required at. So Monday would be ideal for me.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gold?
Yeah, I'll echo the comments that we're out of time and out of gas, and I think that we should continue it. So that's my primary point. But I would also say that to echo what Councilmember Domkowski had said, I think that all of us need to be, and he wants to be here. I'm 100% behind that. I think everybody should be here. And there's also not only the issue of fairness to the applicant, but the fairness to the community and to the citizens who are here pretty late at night. And so I'm certainly in favor of continuing, but I'd like to make sure everybody can show up. I mean, I think that that's important. So I don't think we need to figure that out now because that would be very difficult to do. Everybody's got different schedules, but let's really do our best to make sure that all 6 of us can attend these. It's important. And the last thing that I would say is I think that was a good suggestion by the town attorney that we need guidance. So the overwhelming comments here, at least from my side, were about the conditional use permit and the current compliance and that we don't have a baseline number on that. And I'm quite frankly disappointed that we don't even know the number of seating at right now. So we're sort of, I would like to see information on that. How many seats are there now? And to sort of canvass the businesses to see kind of what's required from parking spots. And maybe just as simple as asking them how many they need might be a better way of going and figuring that out. So we at least know where we are today. And that's critically important because we're sort of like expanding things and building parking and we don't even know what we've got. And so we may actually have enough parking spaces today. And so I don't want to deliberate. I just want to make those points that I would like that information back. And I think a little bit of clarification on the Measure A issue, what's required, might be nice as well.
Okay, thank you. My fellow council members already covered the topics for which I would also want more information. I have a lot of small points I'd like to make in deliberation, but I will hold those. I do think if we could just indulge in a scheduling conversation quickly, because I think yes, Kevin?
Yeah, so on the scheduling conversation, so I know we were talking about next week as a way to do this before the election in responses to Gene's comments. We have a little bit of concern about the ability on the applicant side, gather or get this information, turn it around in a week. I mean, they've done it, get it to this point, but I'm not sure that's a reasonable ask.
We want to ask the applicant?
Well,
Hey, Jen, while they're kibitzing, I thought of one more critical issue. This would really be on our side for staff. I mean, in the course of 1 hour, I did all the calcs for different traditional retail square footage
Amazing.
and what that means for different CUPs. Could we ask staff to go through the exercise of proposing a range of different scenarios for traditional square footage so that we can back out, particularly if we're being asked at least to have an interim measure for what we're going to enforce immediately on the CUPs. I mean, I don't want to overcorrect and screw with a small business and then turn around and have a less restrictive outcome if that's where the numbers lie. So that would be helpful for us to review in a public process, I think.
I 100% agree. Is that, maybe you could share your calculations with,
It's just simple division. It's not,
but yeah, is that
not hard.
clear enough direction?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
All right, is it useful to have a scheduling conversation right now, or should we table that?
Well, I mean, I feel like the options are really,
Very limited. I think I heard
They're- they're-
Monday and Tuesday of next week.
I guess it could be the Monday or the following week, right before, it could be right before.
Wednesday,
I'm
Friday,
not
Monday.
available. I'm not available that
yeah,
day.
and on our side, the only day we three are all available is Wednesday. Gene would be remote.
Wednesday of next week?
I think Ned indicated he's not available on Wednesday.
So this is all, I mean, what this, and I mean, the code is what it is, and I think it actually exists for this.
Yeah.
For this kind of reason, that puts us into just the next regular meeting, which is December 10th. Which is a ways from now, but that's where we are.
Sorry, what's not possible about Monday or Tuesday?
Well, Brian can't be there next Tuesday.
Yeah, well, okay, so there's the question of whether we can be available. And then there's a question of, can we get the information you've asked for? And I mean, you're talking about 6 days, so getting information, making sense of it, putting it out, that takes some time.
So we want to
Mayor,
be.
Mayor
Just-
Wall.
What about Friday the 1st or Monday the 4th? That's more than 6 days, Kevin.
I'm not available on the 1st.
There's Monday the 4th.
Sorry, I'm not available on the 4th. I could maybe.
You know, I've just mentioned there's a lot of moving parts. We want to be fair to everybody, but the truth is there's a seasonal component here too, right? We're going into the winter and the demands on outdoor dining are going to fall off to zero. So, and you can't start a construction project until the spring. So I'm not looking to delay. I would love to get this through to some optimal place, but you know, just thinking about where we are in the calendar,
Yeah, it's not.
it is what it is, I guess, at some point.
All right, let's see what.
Mayor Wall, if I may, I think December sounds like an appropriate time because what we're also asking of the applicant is going to take some time to probably develop.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what they're discussing over on the side here. I think we're going to continue the meeting.
Continue the item.
And then Gene will be
Continued.
seating a new council member and losing two.
That's a good point.
When you continue over an arc that's got an election, anything special that has to happen on the other side with a new person all of a sudden coming into the mix in terms
Well,
of deliberation or?
I
backing
think
up on
both
questions?
candidates are here this evening and have been here all evening, so
Fair enough.
they will have heard, they will have the same level of information that you have.
Geez, maybe there'd be enough time to bring back a municipal code change.
Now they're deliberating. Okay, so I just want to make sure whether I understand the information that you're asking for. So in the comments that I heard, the information you were asking for sounded like you were looking for a redesign of the plans to accommodate tree wells, parallel parking, additional planting. Did I hear that correctly?
I think it was that individual council members were looking for more information on those topics.
So what would, help me out? It is
I
late
mean,
for
I don't
me
think that
too.
there's,
What would more information be? And I'm gonna say right now that this is a very constrained project. We're constrained by the creek, we're constrained by the setbacks, we're constrained by the sewer easement. There are significant constraints that have led to the design that you see here to be code compliant with the parking requirements that the town has in its code. I don't think there's going to be interest in redesigning, so I don't know what level of information you would want to see.
my recommendation and would be to work with town staff to interpret the comments from council. And then, the applicant is always free to reach out to individual council members for clarification, right?
If we need additional clarification, we will reach out.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and so the other piece of information just sounded like seat counting to get a solid number of what's.
So I hate to say, but we're not going to be able to sit here and get perfect clarity.
Okay.
So I would recommend reaching
You
out
just
to
talk to
town staff.
Okay, yeah, we were just, trying to talk in the corner about what exactly you guys were looking for, that, so we could have an idea of whether we could turn it around by Monday or whether we needed more time. And so
So I
that's
think-
just the piece we're having a hard time.
I think we're going to have more time. I think we are getting the sense that's not going to be possible to do this. Is that where you landed on scheduling? And I think there were some good points made that, we are going into the winter months. I'm sensitive to the desire to get this done, but I think it doesn't seem to be coming together in an easy way.
I turned around
So-
awnings overnight, staff. It's not been easy. So, but I have done it. Done what everybody has asked so far. Now you're asking more. You never spoke to DeLuna and you said you did.
All right, okay, all right, no, we're not going to do this. Pause. We're going to have more time for public comment. We are going to resolve the scheduling issue and then we're going to move on.
If you'd like my opinion, I think it's not realistic to do this before December, and I'm sorry you're dark in November, but the applicant has worked hard to meet deadlines, but once they turn things in, staff really needs time to analyze them for you, and
Yeah.
it's not fair to the public or to the applicant. We don't have that opportunity to do that and present the information to you in a way that's understandable.
I agree. I think this is too important of a topic to rush. And so procedurally, may I just say we are continuing this item until our next meeting in December?
Yes, I think you should indicate December 10, and then you would need a vote on that.
Okay, with a motion?
Yes.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to continue agenda item A until our December 10th meeting. And I would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second it.
Councilmembers Brown,
Yes.
Domkowski,
Yes.
Fluid,
Yes.
Gold,
Yes.
Shaw,
No.
and Mayor Wall.
Yes. All right, we still have one other.
We're done with the.
So yeah,
So-
folks, we will be continuing this conversation, this agenda item at the December meeting. So there will be another opportunity to have public comment. And the materials and everything for it will be posted in the normal course. So thank you thank you to everyone for coming this evening and for all of your thoughtful comments. It really did contribute to the conversation. And you're welcome to stay. We have one other agenda item. No. All right, we're gonna try to move so we can get folks home at I know it's already not a super reasonable hour. All right, we have public hearing item B. It's an adoption of an ordinance adding section 30.04 related to town council compensation. Kevin,
This is the second reading of the ordinance that you adopted, I'm sorry, you introduced 2 weeks ago, which establishes a salary of $950 per month for council members, starting with the new term would begin in December of 2024. That's it.
all right, are there any questions from council to staff on this topic? Seeing universal shaking of heads. All right, any public comment? All right, not seeing any hands or takers in the room. Any council member deliberations? All right, well then I would entertain a motion.
Move we accept, what was that number? Item B. Move we adopt the ordinance adding section 30.04, town council compensation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Council members Brown,
Yes.
Domkowski, Blewett,
Yes.
Gold, Shaw,
Yep.
Mayor Wall.
Yes. All right, that concludes our public hearing and business portions of the meeting. Looking over to Kevin, are there any volunteer committee updates?
Volunteer reception this Friday, 4 o'clock here. And on the 2nd, I don't know if anyone ever comes out from the council for the Cars and Coffee that the Recreation Committee occasionally does, but they're going to do that Saturday the 2nd at Town Hall.
All right. More awesome town committee events on the calendar. I love it. Any council member communications?
Maybe just an acknowledgement that this is our last time until Councilmember Fluid and Shaw are on the other side of the dais and riding off into the sunset. And I just wanted to say it's been an honor to serve with both of you.
Absolutely. Second that.
Yes, you're here.
Likewise.
I just wanted to acknowledge the work. This is our mayor's final time with the gavel. And I'd like to thank Jen for her fantastic work. It's been a very difficult year. And you've handled it with great dignity. And I truly, we don't agree on some things, but I have never not respected your ability to run a meeting, and you do a great job. Thank you.
Here, here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now that everybody left, we're pretending we're 40 people here, just back and because you are an expert.
I really appreciate the positive feedback, and it's really been an honor and a privilege. And I'll have more to say in December, more about the honor of serving and also about our truly fantastic council members that are rolling off the council. So we can all look forward to that. And I don't have a closing this meeting. I'm going to save it. Hopefully have something interesting in December. All right, so we can close the council meeting of October 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you.